Chapter 355. What countermeasures do you have? No matter what can my family do to me? Father and mother won't change their attitude towards me. As for matriarch, even if nothing happened, she has never liked me. Moreover, that Madame Lu only dared to make a ruckus because she had no other choice. Qin Yining was unperturbed. He didn't take Madame Lu's provocation seriously at all. She knew very well that the Lu family was able to last for hundreds of years because the person in power was definitely not an idiot. Madame Lu's way of doing things was domineering and unscrupulous. This type of woman was the root of the family. She was definitely not the core of the Lu family. The Lu family's intentions were still unclear. It was too early to panic. Moreover, she was just a small figure who couldn't control the Lu family's actions. Why should she take it to heart? You're really open-minded. Bing Tang sighed and said, I originally thought that after leaving the Dian and without the fatuous emperor and demon empress, we could live freely in Dezhou. Who knew that after coming here, we would realize that it's impossible to live freely? Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh and say, Who said that? Aren't we very free now? Free? I don't think so. You're trapped in the house all day. At most, you're just helping Matriarch in the morning and at night. Matriarch's impression of you is already bad. She's always mocking and ridiculing you. It's really depressing. Qin Yining waved his hand and said with a smile, Silly girl, do you think I look like an ordinary lady from a wealthy family? Bing Tang was stunned when she heard that. Xian Yun, who was combing Lian Xiaozhou's hair, laughed and said, Miss, you're not an ordinary person. Naturally, you don't have to care about what ordinary ladies do. Qin Yining smiled and said, No matter what I do, as long as the main direction of the matter goes according to my ideas, then I'll be free. Bing Tang asked, Then you're saying that this matter also goes according to your ideas? Qin Yining raised her eyebrows noncommittally and said, There are some things that are easier to deal with when they become bigger. He stood up and said, Let's wear thicker clothes and take a walk in the courtyard. The weather in Dezhou was cold. It was already February, but the cold wind outside was still bone-chilling. Qin Yining was wearing a thick winter coat and holding a handkerchief. He was talking and laughing with the servant girls as he walked around the courtyard. The current residence was no longer as spacious as it used to be. Now, it was just a courtyard with two entrances. Each branch was assigned to live in a different room. Therefore, as long as the family wanted to, they could see what was going on in Qin Yining's room. Old Madam put down the pole and closed the rear window. She sat upright and snorted coldly. That girl is living a very happy life. Mammy Qin smiled and brought over a bowl of cheese. She said with a smile, Old Madam, eat some snacks. The kitchen just sent them over. They're still warm. However, Old Madam waved her hand and said, Say, although living in this courtyard is good in every aspect, it's just a little small. Once you open the window, you can see the movements of those little hoofs in the back garden. If they speak louder, you can also hear them clearly. I also don't know what's wrong with me now. Once I see fourth girl's crafty appearance, I become impatient. No matter how I look at her, I feel that she's annoying. Mammy Qin thought helplessly. Fourth Miss is so similar to First Master. She's just a bit fair in doing things, yet you're already hating her. Although Mammy Qin also felt that there were many things that Old Madam did that weren't honorable, she was still loyal to her master. She sighed and said, Old Madam only thinks this way because she's angry. How can that wretched girl offend the Lu family? Old Madam asked her 3 sons yesterday and finally understood how deep the foundation of the Lu family was. She couldn't figure out how Qin Yining offended the Lu family by just attending a banquet. That Marquis Zhongyong is definitely not an ordinary noble. I heard that if General Mi didn't die, he would be at least as famous as Prince Consort Ji and Prince Zhongshuan. The Marquis Zhongyong's wife is also born in the Lu family. How high is her status? What's in the fourth girl's mind? Why doesn't she get along well with others? When Old Madam said this, she angrily slammed the table. The blue and white porcelain bowl with a lid of carps playing with lotuses on the table jingled. Say, if we really become homeless, then we can't afford to lose our face outside. The more Old Madam thought about it, the angrier she became. She was in a fit of anger, so the crisp laughter of the girls in the courtyard seemed to be particularly annoying to her. Old Madam was just about to open the window and angrily scold Cheen Ening when a maidservant came in from outside the room. Replying to Old Madam, "There's a madam outside and wants to see fourth young miss." Old Madam was worried that her family wouldn't have a house to live in. When she heard the word madam, she immediately thought of Madame Lu. She hurriedly urged Mammy Cheen, "Quick, quick, call that wretched girl over. I'll tell her a few words before letting her go see the guest. Otherwise, if we thoroughly offend that person, our family's foundation is still shallow. How can we continue living on?" Mammy Cheen advised, "Old Madam, I'm anxious. We don't know who is coming yet." Although that was the case, Mammy Cheen still went to the rear courtyard to invite Cheen Ening over. Cheen Ening also heard that a young madam was looking for her, so she instructed Ji Yun and Bing Tang to go to the front to serve that person tea first. She said that she was changing her clothes and would immediately arrive. After entering Old Madam's room, Old Madam angrily said, "Evil creature, look at the trouble you've caused." Cheen Ening was baffled by the reprimand. "Old Madam, what's wrong? Why are you so angry?" Old Madam was so angry that she grabbed the lid and was about to smash it. However, she thought that the family wasn't as glorious as before. There was still a set of blue and white porcelain tea sets. If one was smashed, the others wouldn't be able to be used. Thus, she took a deep breath and put down the teacup. "You still have the nerve to ask me? Let me tell you, you must properly apologize today and let Madame Lu's anger dissipate. If it really affects our family, see if I don't ask your father to hang you up and whip you. You don't abide by the rules and don't want to live a good life. Don't implicate the whole family." Old Madam's words were extremely unpleasant. If an unmarried girl was really whipped by her father, her reputation would be ruined. Although she knew that Old Madam was scaring her, Cheen Ening still felt anger rising in her heart. "Old Madam, don't worry. I won't implicate the Fu. However, the Fu has relied on me to gain power and wealth, but I didn't see you give me a good face. Now that such a small matter has happened, you've started to speak harshly to me. If all the grandmothers in the world were like you, scolding people without distinguishing between right and wrong, I'm afraid that ordinary young ladies would have to hang themselves." "You," Old Madam fiercely slammed the table. "You did something wrong and still don't know how to repent. In the end, you've been living in the countryside since young and haven't received any education. You can't compare to the daughters raised by noble families. Old Madam, please think twice before you speak. I didn't have the fortune to be raised in the Fu. Could it be that I took the initiative to leave the family Qin? The past was the greatest pain in the hearts of Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan. Therefore, the people in the Fu would deliberately avoid this matter. Although Old Madam also avoided this taboo, now that Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan weren't around, it made her feel both physically and mentally comfortable to bully her disobedient granddaughter. Old Madam was pestering endlessly mainly because she wanted Qin Ening to admit defeat to Madame Lu. However, Qin Ening couldn't be the first to lower his head. "Old Madam." Qin Ening straightened her expression and said very seriously, "I know that Old Madam said those words in a fit of anger. Moreover, with Old Madam's wisdom, some things can be seen through with just a hint. Right now, I will only say one thing. My father has just come to the Dezhou dynasty and is unfamiliar with the people and the place. The disputes in the imperial court are so complicated. What do you think we should do for my father to let him have a good life?" When Old Madam heard Qin Ening's coaxing tone, she felt a burst of impatience. Right now, she didn't like someone who was pleasing to the eye. Therefore, she couldn't stand her every word and action. Qin Ening didn't expect Old Madam to give an answer, so she just said, "My father is an official in the imperial court. What he wants is to be able to establish himself in the Dezhou." Old Madam naturally understood what it meant to establish himself and didn't need her granddaughter to say more. That Lu family is indeed powerful. However, on this matter, can my father admit defeat? If he retreats this time, next time, someone will dare to ride on our heads and shit on us. When Old Madam heard Qin Ening's unhurried analysis, the balance in her heart tilted a little. Qin Yining continued, "My father wants to be an official, so dignity is the most important thing. When the Liu family wants to make a move, they have to consider your majesty's opinion. Madame Liu isn't from the main branch of the Liu family. She's a young lady from a side branch. Moreover, her style has always been open and insolent. She dares to threaten that we can't live here anymore. She doesn't have to wait for us to make a move. There will naturally be someone to deal with it. I definitely won't admit defeat and apologize to Madame Liu. My father still wants to be an official in the imperial court." Qin Yining explained patiently to old Madame. He only hoped that she could understand and not make a decision on her own and drag down Qin Huayan. Qin Yining felt that his face was secondary. The most important thing was the family's attitude. It was Madame Liu's fault. If the family Qin was willing to lower their heads, then wouldn't more people bully them in the future? At that time, would they have to give in one by one? It was better to make a scene with Madame Liu now and let people know that the Dian's faction of surrendering officials weren't all cowards. Qin Yining ignored old Madame and quickly walked to the front yard. Unexpectedly, when he reached the door, Bing Tang came up and said in a low voice, "County Yan's Wang Fei is here." County Yan's Wang Fei, Li Yinyan? Old Madame was probably nervous for nothing. Qin Yining's angry and helpless mood instantly improved. He couldn't help but laugh. Lifting the curtain, he smelled the pleasant fragrance of tea when he entered the main hall. Li Yinyan was wearing a dark purple satin cloak. A guanine hood of the same color was on her head. It made her skin appear as white as snow and her lips appear even more lustrous. Qin Yining smiled and bowed, saying, "I didn't think that County Yan's Wang Fei would come to my humble home. Your presence brings light to my humble home." Chapter 356. Qin Yining didn't rush her. She poured a cup of tea for Li Yinyan and then pushed the teacup to her hand. Li Yinyan smiled slightly at Qin Yining. "Your Majesty has bestowed Junwang Fu. Is some distance away from your Fu. I just finished moving and wanted to come here for a stroll. After all, we are all Dian people. Even if we had some unhappiness in the past, we are all family now." Li Yinyan's expression was warm and gentle. It was the same easygoing appearance that Qin Yining had when he first met her on Mount Changchun. Qin Yining was surprised, but didn't show it on her face. She only smiled and said, "So your Majesty has already bestowed a Fu. I've been in the Fu all day and have become a frog in the well. I don't even know what's going on outside. I haven't congratulated Xiao Qian yet, but Wang Fei has come. I'm really ashamed." Li Yinyan saw that Qin Yining was so courteous and secretly sighed in relief. It seemed that she had thought too much. Qin Yining's, "Your presence brings light to my humble dwelling," didn't have any sarcasm. Not at all. Now that we've come to the Zhou, everyone's situation is very difficult. Even if Miss Qin didn't say it, I can understand. Qin Yining only smiled warmly. Saying such heartfelt words all of a sudden was a little too much. Her relationship with Li Yinyan used to be a nodding acquaintance, but after Li Yinyan entered the palace, they became enemies. She knew that it was impossible for their relationship to become close all of a sudden. Li Yinyan saw that Qin Yining didn't say much and took the initiative to find a topic to chat about. They mostly talked about the prosperity of the capital in Dezhou or the new styles of fabric. They didn't talk about official matters. Qin Yining saw that Li Yinyan was beating around the bush and was actually a bit impatient. However, she was usually very patient and could keep her cool. Therefore, since Li Yinyan didn't say anything, she didn't ask. She just accompanied her and said a few words when the time was right. Li Yinyan's mouth was dry. She had already clearly revealed that she had something to discuss with him, but Qin Yining didn't even ask a single question. Li Yinyan felt very helpless. In the past, when she was in Dian, this trick was more than enough to deal with many older women. Why was it useless against a 16-year-old girl? Seeing that it was getting late, she couldn't stay any longer and could only whisper, "I have something to discuss with you. Have you finally run out of patience?" Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and waved his hand at Ji Yun, who was serving behind him. Ji Yun and the others retreated. Li Yinyan's maidservant also retreated to the corridor, guarding the door to prevent people from approaching. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Princess consort, Please speak your mind. Li Yin said, Actually, I'm here today for an important matter in your life. Oh. Qin Yining raised an eyebrow and said with a smile, I didn't think that Wang Fei would like to be a matchmaker now. Was he mocking her? Li Yin suppressed the discomfort in her heart and said with a dignified smile, I have nothing to do, and I'm not here for an outsider. Her gaze was gentle as she looked at Qin Yining and said, A while ago, Wang Yi and I heard about the grievances you suffered at the Prince Zhongshuan Fu. Wang Yi really feels distress for you, but right now we have no choice. I know that Miss Qin is a person of noble character and will not be swayed by some gold, silver, and gold. So this time, I didn't bring those things to be a matchmaker. Based on our relationship, I won't beat around the bush. Today, I'm here for the matter between you and Wang Yi. Right now, Wang Yi only has Gu Chang and I by his side. The other Si, Fei, and concubines have either died of illness or disappeared. Wang Yi truly likes you. As long as you nod, Wang Yi can immediately ask your majesty for an edict to make you a Si Fei. Actually, I feel that it doesn't matter whether you're a Wang Fei or a Si Fei. The most important thing is that Wang Yi truly loves you. I know that little sister Qin has suffered a lot outside. Now that you have such a good home and someone who truly loves you is a good thing. Qin Yining sat dignified and only listened to Li Yin gently. Li Yin could not immediately detect her likes and dislikes, and felt more and more uncertain. However, Li Yin had always felt that the county king of Yin was willing to give Qin Yining a place at his side and give her a stable home to live in. This was already a great favor. Was she still not satisfied? Ever since that day, when Gu Chang deliberately instigated in front of Wang Yi, Li Yin could feel that Yu Qi Yin seemed to like Qin Yining even more. Rather than let Yu Qi Yin bring it up himself, or let that little wench Gu Chang steal the limelight, it was better for her, the principal wife, to think of it for him first. With her status as a Yu Qi Yin, she could not stop more women from marrying into the family. It was easy for her to be a virtuous wife. Qin Yining lowered her long eyelashes when she heard this. She thought for a moment and then shook her head. I appreciate Wang Fei's kindness, but perhaps you have some understanding of the matters of the imperial court? I am no longer the young lady of a noble family. My father is an official in the imperial court. There are many things that he cannot do as he wishes. As a member of the Qin family, it is the same for me. Li Yin was a little confused by Qin Yining's words. She did not understand what Qin Yining meant, but the meaning of rejection was clear. Qin Yining would definitely refuse to marry her into the family. At this moment, Li Yin actually let out a sigh of relief. After all, Gu Chang's hypocrisy had already made her feel inferior. If another Qin Yining came to the royal prince's mansion, then she was afraid that she would lose her position as the princess consort of the county prince of Yin sooner or later. Younger sister Qin, don't be in such a hurry to decline. Li Yin sighed. Although De Zhou is good, it is still different from where we come from. The men here are all strong and powerful, but they lack some gentleness and delicacy. Younger sister, why don't you reconsider? Qin Yining smiled slightly and said, Wang Fei, you don't need to persuade me anymore. Actually, my intentions are already very clear. I will not marry into the imperial family. Even if the county prince of Yin was once part of the imperial family, I will not agree to marry him. When she heard Qin Yining say this, Li Yin was inwardly very happy. If Qin Yining said that she would not marry him, then she would have a future to strive for and hope for. If Qin Yining helped her a little more verbally, Li Yin was certain that her future with the county prince of Yin would be like a pair of lovebirds. However, Li Yin also knew that Qin Yining would not say good things about her in front of the county prince of Yin for no reason. Forget it. Li Yin had already said what she wanted to say. The county prince of Yin had hinted for her to be the matchmaker, and she had done as she was told. The success or failure of this matter was no longer within her scope of consideration. Li Yin stood up and nodded. Younger sister Qin, think about it carefully. Who knows, maybe the next time Wang Yi will come looking for you. After she said this, she covered her mouth and laughed. Qin Yining smiled slightly and called for Bing Tang and Ji Yun to help Li Yin out. Li Yanyan did not forget to remind Qin Yining even after she had boarded the carriage. Right now, the household is struggling to make ends meet. If younger sister is willing to stay by the county prince of Yan's side, you'll be able to save a lot of food and other necessities. Chapter 357. Miss, I think that County Wang Fei of Yan has crossed her bottom line. Bing Tang came forward to support Qin Yining's arm. He said in a low voice, "It seems that she does not get along well with Gu Shi and the Wang Fu." Jian also said, "County Wang Fei of Yin cares a lot about his wives and concubines." How is he caring about his wives and concubines? I think that he can't forget our Mississippi. Bing Tang joked with a smile. If Wang Yi knows of this, I don't know how angry he will be. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when he thought of how Pang Xiao might behave. He had not realized it before, but the more time he spent with her, the more he could see that Pang Xiao was a jealous person. He was a domineering person outside, but he would become petty when it came to her matters. This contrast was very interesting. Qin Yining shook his head with a smile and turned to return to the Fu. But just as Bing Tang said, after dinner, Qin Yining was leaning against a light blue satin pillow on the heated Kong by the window and reading a novel with the light of a lamp when a soft sound came from the back window of the cleaning room. Xian Yun and Ji Yun were doing needlework and exchanged a look when they heard the sound. Xian Yun stood in front of Qin Yining while Ji Yun quietly went back to check the situation. She carefully moved to the door and heard Pang Zhao's voice from inside. "It's me." Ji Yun stilled and hurriedly lifted the curtain to confirm. Seeing that it was Pang Xiao, she sighed in relief and said with a smile, "Wang Yi, where's your miss?" "Miss is reading." Ji Yun bowed and led Pang Xiao in. Qin Yining had put down the novel and was taking off his shoes. Pang Xiao looked inside the room and confirmed that there were no outsiders. Then he waved his hand at Xian Yun and Ji Yun. The two maidservants glanced at each other, snickering as they bowed and retreated. Pang Xiao blew out the lights before helping Qin Yining to sit down. He bent over and held her feet in white socks. He frowned and said, "Why are your feet so cold? Don't come down and warm yourself up." Qin Yining smiled and said, "I don't think it'll be easy for me to get used to the weather here." She lifted the thin blanket and was about to cover herself when she saw Pang Xiao take off his boots and get on the Kong bed. He sat cross-legged opposite her and grabbed her feet with his big hands and put them into his arms. "Sai, what are you doing? Let go." Stepping on Pang Zhao's warm and firm abdomen, Qin Yining's face turned red. His toes curled up, and he quickly withdrew his leg. However, Pang Xiao didn't allow her to refuse. He held her ankles, lifted his clothes, and placed her cold feet on his stomach. He even wrapped his arms around her legs to prevent her from moving away. "How is it? Is it warm?" Pang Xiao moved closer to her and chuckled. Qin Yining glared at him with a red face, but her struggling weakened. His body was like a small stove. It was very warm in his arms. His abdomen muscles felt particularly good, like a hard iron block wrapped in a thick layer of velvet. Thinking about where she was stepping, Qin Yining only curled her toes and didn't dare to make any unnecessary movements. Not only was her face red, but even her ears and neck were red. Fortunately, in order to prevent people from outside from seeing the shadows in the room, they had already blown out the lights. Otherwise, if people saw her like this, it wouldn't be enough to embarrass her. Pang Xiao was in a good mood. He chuckled and said in a low voice, "After the matter with Madame Liu, your family didn't make trouble for you, right?" He lowered his voice and moved closer to her. It was obvious that he was afraid that someone would discover him. Qin Yining thought about the size of the manor and the fact that she wasn't the only one living in the backyard. She couldn't help but become cautious and whispered, "It's fine. The people of the Liu family said that I was nervous. It's normal for people to be nervous." When she lowered her voice was different from usual. There was a hint of laziness and tenderness in it, which made Pang Zhao's ears itch when he heard it. His voice also became a bit hoarse. "If you have any difficulties, don't hide them from me. Just tell me. If your family can't solve it, you still have me." Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle softly. "I know you will support me, but the matter isn't that serious. Moreover, the Liu family has a deep foundation. Presumably, when you cooperated with them to attack Beiji, you had a lot of disputes, right? I know that with your ability, you don't need to be afraid of anyone, but you should be careful about things that aren't necessary. Don't get into trouble for no reason. When Pang Xiao heard Qin Yining's words of concern, he didn't feel disappointed because his ability was doubted. Instead, he felt comfortable from the bottom of his heart. It was like drinking a bowl of steaming meat soup in the cold winter. It warmed him from the inside out. Qin Yining should like him very much now, right? In the beginning, it was he who shamelessly tried to get closer to Qin Yining. He had spilled blood and climbed over walls. When he thought about the stupid things he did to pursue Qin Yining, he realized that he had never done anything for anyone since he was a child. Now, everything had a good result. Qin Yining was loyal to him. Pang Xiao felt that all his efforts were fruitful. At least, only when he was strong could he stand up for his wife, right? Pang Xiao rubbed her calf with his big hand and couldn't help smiling. He began to feel grateful to Mr. Zheng, who had found him. If Li Qiqian hadn't forced him to go to the battlefield with the Pang family's banner, he might have died in the war or become a tavern shopkeeper. The only thing he was sure of was that he wouldn't have met Qin Yining if that was the case. If this person didn't exist in his life, how boring would it be? His large hand followed her calf and reached into his lapel, his palm covering her foot. He sighed and said, "When I first saw you, you were still so small. You were chased out of the medicine store and fell to the ground. The things in the basket spilled all over the ground. That scene really made my heart ache. I thought you would cry, but you didn't. Instead, you wiped your face and went to buy meat buns." Qin Yining was stunned. He suddenly looked up at Pang Xiao. What did you say?" Pang Xiao looked at her gently. "I was just found by Mr. Zheng not long ago. I happened to hear Mr. Zheng talk about the child they stole from the family Qin. After asking, I found out that Mr. Zheng had swapped you with another girl for revenge. He even threw you away. I've always believed that misfortune shouldn't involve family members. Why should the next generation be implicated for what happened to the previous generation? That's why I begged Mr. Zheng for a long time before I came to Liang City and saw you. However, my position in the army was low and I was under Mr. Zheng's control. I didn't have much money left for you. Sister E, I'm sorry. I let you suffer on the mountain for so many years. The money I left for you was limited. It shouldn't have been enough for you to last long, right? When I went to Liang City the next year, I couldn't find you. I asked around, and they all said that your foster mother was dead. You disappeared without a trace. I was really sad for a long time. If it wasn't for General Cheng, you would have been living in the family Qin as a rich young lady. Why did you have to live such a hard life? You are. Qin Yining's lips trembled. He grabbed Pang Xiao's clothes and whispered in a choked voice, "You are that beautiful brother?" Chapter 358. A 7 or 8-year-old little girl looked up at him with her big eyes and called him beautiful brother. At that time, he only felt his heart soften because the little girl was too cute. Now, Pang Xiao also felt his heart soften because this beautiful brother really softened his bones. He always felt that he had inexhaustible strength, but now he felt that he might not even have the ability to lift his arms. Only the feeling of softness all over his body occupied his senses. Our Pang family is sorry for what happened back then. After a long time, Pang Xiao slowly said these words. Qin Yining's mind was in a mess at this time, but her tears seemed to have their own ideas. They refused to listen to her control and kept flowing out. She was not a weak person and rarely shed tears. Today, she didn't know what was wrong with her. When she heard that it was the former subordinates of Pang Xiao's father who did it, she felt inexplicably wronged. Perhaps it didn't matter who did it, she wouldn't care. Only Pang Xiao, because she entrusted too many feelings to him, would have such high expectations of him. She didn't resent him, she just felt wronged. Seeing that Qin Yining didn't answer for a long time, Pang Xiao could faintly hear her sobbing in the quiet room. He touched her face with his big hand and felt that his hand was wet. He suddenly panicked. "Sister E, don't cry. It's my fault. It's my fault." Pang Xiao went forward with heartache and hugged Qin Yining in his arms. I'm sorry. If I had known earlier, If I had taken time to see you more often, you wouldn't have suffered so much. Qin Yining shook her head and sobbed. It's not your fault. If you hadn't given me more than 10 taels of silver, I wouldn't have been able to treat my foster mother's illness. Later, I might have been sold. You've helped me a lot. You've given me enough money to show filial piety to my adoptive mother and sent her off. When he heard that she almost had to sell herself to pay back the money back then, Pang Zhao's heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. He tightened his arms and shook her, saying, If I really hurt you to that point, I really deserve to die. You don't know, but this matter has always been a knot in my heart. Before I could participate in your life, it was because of my father that you suffered so much. I feel that I've let you down. But in the early years, my status in the army was not stable. I didn't have my own power and connections, so I had to look at other people's faces when I wanted to do anything. It was only in the past 2 years that I gained my own power and could do what I wanted to do. So you took advantage of the attack on Dian to go to the capital? Qin Yining recalled the scene when he first met this person at the Fairy Lady Temple. He sat up straight and said, Fairy Lady Lu was your subordinate back then. She wasn't really my subordinate. We had some interactions a long time ago. Fairy Lady Lu was extremely smart and good at scheming. I was also close to Mu too, so I often talked to her about some things. Qin Yining wiped away his tears. His brain worked quickly, connecting the dots. Mu Jinghu was Tian Jizi's martial nephew, and Pang Zhao's words just now could prove that Fairy Lady Lu was Tian Jizi. Qin Yining analyzed this conclusion, but he wasn't surprised. He just remembered that he had spent a lot of money to let Fairy Lady Lu pretend to be Tian Jizi. He felt inexplicably embarrassed. Pang Zhao continued, Actually, when the family Qin people found you, I received some news. At that time, the war was tense and father-in-law was in a high position, so he naturally received a lot of attention. On the day you first returned to the Fu, I secretly went to take a look. They arranged for you to stay in a courtyard near the wall and deliberately neglected you, making you wait for a long time. When you were sitting on the stone bench by the bamboo forest, I was watching you from the roof. Qin Yining was really shocked. She didn't expect that there would be so many details after their first meeting, other than when they were young. Pang Zhao's voice revealed some shyness when he said this. He said shyly, After that, I snatched the hairpin from you. I put it under my pillow and took it out to look at it every day. Qin Yining's eyes widened in shock. She thought of the lecher who had descended from the sky and snatched her hairpin and even touched her face. She had always been concerned about this matter. She didn't expect Pang Zhao to do such a thing. Hearing him say that he put the hairpin under his pillow and looked at it every day, Qin Yining's entire face turned red. In that case, before they met at the Fairy Lady Temple, he had already been paying attention to her and cared about her. He even snatched her hairpin back to look at it and think of her. You from that time onwards, you. Yes, I liked you at that time. Although I didn't understand it at that time, everything I did instinctively proved that my heart was biased towards you. Pang Zhao held Qin Yining's hands. His rough fingers rubbed the back of her hands, which were as smooth as soft tofu, and he kissed her palm sincerely. Sister Yi, you also like me and care about me now. I am very happy. Such straightforward words made Qin Yining both shy and happy. For a moment, she didn't know how to react. She only looked at his vague outline in the darkness and smiled foolishly. Pang Zhao felt her happy mood and kissed her fingertips and the back of her hands countless times. After talking about the past, Pang Zhao felt less guilty. He asked nervously, Sister Yi, can you forgive me? Qin Yining found it funny and said, It's not your fault. Why should I blame you? I agree with what you said. Family members should not be implicated. The things of the previous generation were done by the previous generation. The people who stole me out of the family Qin were not arranged by you. You really don't have to suffer too much because of this. But I still feel uneasy. Pang Zhao held her in his arms again and sighed deeply. Qin Yining breathed in his fresh masculine breath and felt that time was really strange. Maybe this is cause and effect. Because of the hostility between Beiji and Dian, my father tried to drive a wedge between the two families, the hatred between the two families, and the actions of Mr. Zheng and the others. If they didn't steal me out of the family chain, how could you notice me? Naturally, we wouldn't have met in Liang City, and all the things that happened later wouldn't have happened. Thinking about it carefully, if she really became strangers with Pang Xiao, her heart would be hollowed out by someone. She would feel anxious and inexplicably sad. Pang Xiao felt the same way. If Zheng Pei hadn't done such extreme things, if he hadn't been taught by his grandparents and had a completely different worldview from Zheng Pei, he wouldn't have felt guilty about the daughter of the family Qin, let alone pay attention to her. If Qin Yining had grown up by Qin Huaiyuan's side and enjoyed all the glory and splendor and was no different from an ordinary girl, then to him, she was really just the daughter of his enemy. Both of them had the same size in their hearts. Their arms hugged each other even tighter. Sister E. Yes. Pang Xiao kissed her forehead and said with a smile, "The moon is so beautiful tonight." Qin Yining looked around in shock. It was pitch black inside the room. It was cold, and the windows were not open. How could Pang Xiao see the moon was beautiful? Her straightforward actions and silent criticism were written all over her face. Pang Xiao almost laughed out loud. Qin Yining felt helpless when he saw his chest rise and fall in stifled laughter. The two looked at each other, and then at each other, and laughed foolishly for no reason. After a long while, Pang Xiao said in a low voice, "I have something to ask you." "What is it?" Qin Yining's voice was amused. Pang Xiao said, "Why did County Wang Fei come to find you?" Qin Yining felt speechless. "How did you know that County Wang Fei came to find me? If you had ordered someone to stay by my side and report back to you, shouldn't you know the purpose of her visit? Why are you asking me in person now?" Qin Yining's tone was very calm, and there was an amused smile on his face. However, there was no light in the room, and Pang Xiao could not see his expression. He thought that he was angry and hurriedly explained, "My subordinates were watching the movements in County Wang Fu, so they saw County Wang Fei come in and out. As to your side, I will only arrange for people to protect you. I will not watch you. You are not a criminal. Why should I restrict your freedom?" Qin Yining was amused by his nervous appearance and laughed. Pang Xiao finally reacted. He hugged her in amusement and anger. "All right, don't laugh. Tell me why she came to find you." Qin Yining said, "She is puffing herself up at her own cost." Qin Yining described Li Yinyan's arrival in detail. In the end, he said, "That is why it is said that a woman's life is tiring. She clearly does not like it, but for the sake of her reputation as a good wife and mother, she has to pretend to be magnanimous. There are things that she cannot say, grievances that she cannot tell. She puts on an act in front of outsiders and secretly cries when she is home." Hearing her sigh, Pang Xiao hurriedly promised, "I am not that kind of man. I will not make things difficult for you." Qin Yining glared at him and said, "Don't say it's so early. There are still 10 great beauties in your family. I did not go to find them of my own accord, but they were given to you by the emperor. They are your legitimate concubines. They are people who can carry on the family line for you." Qin Yining's tone was slightly urgent. He realized that his words were inappropriate. It was common for a man to have many concubines. Even his father had taken in a few concubines in the past for the sake of having children. Those men with power and influence had attained a certain position in the government. Even if he did not look for them himself, there were many colleagues and subordinates who would send beautiful women to him. He could not refuse such an occasion, so he could only accept them. Not to mention the beautiful concubines sent over, he could also casually take in the maidservants in the study and bedroom of the man with power and influence. If a maidservant could become the man's concubine, she would be more dignified than ordinary maidservants. In the future, once she gave birth to a son or a daughter, she would be able to openly become a concubine. That would be half a master. Qin Yining understood these realities. Moreover, every woman had to watch her husband sleep with concubines and concubines, socialize outside, and drink wine with prostitutes. She had to hide all her sadness in her heart. This was a process that every woman had to go through. However, when she thought about how Pang Xiao would one day transfer his gentleness to someone else, she still felt a bit disappointed. "Miss." The door was pushed open with a creak. Xian Yun quickly walked in. Qin Yining returned to his senses and hurriedly pushed Pang Xiao aside to look at the door. Chapter 359. Ayu, why aren't you leaving? Qin Yining was like a frightened rabbit. She immediately jumped up and pushed Pang Xiao with both hands. If my father sees you in my room right now, I won't be able to explain myself. Pang Xiao almost fell off the com from her push. He didn't know where this girl got the strength. He helplessly climbed onto his boots. Before he left, he didn't forget to touch Qin Yining's face. Qin Yining hurriedly laid back down on the Kong and covered himself with the blanket. Seeing Pang Xiao's figure disappear behind the door, he closed his eyes. When he heard Qin Huayuan's footsteps coming in, he sat up as though he had just woken up. Xian Yun had already lit the silk lantern. Qin Yining said with a smile, "Father, why have you come at this time? I heard Ji Yun say that you slept. Why did you sleep so early? Are you sick?" Qin Huayuan sat down in a round chair that Xian Yun and Ji Yun had carried over and took the hot tea that Bing Tang had brought over. Qin Yining said with a smile, "How can I get sick so easily? However, the weather in Jing is different from our world. It is really too cold. I didn't even want to get off the Kong. I stayed in bed and read while holding the blanket. As I read, I fell asleep. It's not good to read at night. It hurts your eyes." Qin Huayuan took a sip of tea and waved his hand. Xian Yun, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang bowed and left. Qin Yining sat up straight and said, "Father, are you looking for me for something?" And Qin Huayuan said, "Did County Wangfei come to find you to say that she wants to become County Wangfei with you?" "I really can't hide anything from Father." "That is true." County Wangfei spoke with emotion and reason. She spoke with great sincerity. "However, I think that Father should know. I will not agree to them." "Of course I know," Qin Huayuan said with a smile. "I've already told you about your relationship with Prince Zhongshuan. I won't object, but I'm here to confirm it with you. You've made up your mind not to have anything to do with the County King of Yin, and I know what to do in court." Her father was a second-ranked UN official who would enter the cabinet in the future. Such a high-ranking official, yet he was still able to think about his daughter's feelings. This really moved Qin Yining. Qin Yining said, "Father, please don't be restrained by your daughter's selfishness. You still have to put yourself first." Qin Huayuan laughed. "Silly girl, you still don't understand. Why did your father become an official? It was not only his own career, but more importantly, the happiness of his family. If I let my family make sacrifices for some unimportant things, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? The gains don't make up for the losses." Qin Yining admired Qin Huayuan even more. Qin Huayuan was very smart, but there were people in the world who were smarter than him. Those who had been officials in the imperial court for many years and had not fallen, which one of them was not a shrewd person. Qin Huayuan was more famous than those people because of his charisma. He always had an unbreakable bottom line in his heart, and he would never let distractions affect his decisions. When he was serving the incapable ruler in Dian, he did not forget his principles. Whether he was serving the Yu Yin or Li Qitian now, Qin Huayuan was always calm and collected. He was able to handle everything with equanimity. Qin Yining admired his father from the bottom of his heart. It was as if he had the ability to solve all the problems in the world. No matter how big the problem was, it could not shake his heart. He would always be able to handle everything steadily and choose the right path for the family. "Father, I understand what you mean," Qin Yining said with a smile. "I hope I can become someone like you in the future." Qin Huayuan was amused by these words and chuckled. "What's so good about being like me? Of course you have your own advantages. Otherwise, why would there be so many people who admire you so much?" Qin Huayuan laughed again. "Don't flatter me. I heard your grandmother got angry because of the residents?" "Yes." Qin Yining sighed. "I didn't expect the Marchioness of Zhongyong to be so arrogant and unreasonable. She even dared to say such arrogant words. If she knew that the residents had been bought by my people long ago and that the handover procedure with you was just a formality, I don't know what she would think." Qin Huayuan put down his teacup and asked with a smile, "Then tell me, how do you plan to solve this matter?" Qin Yining thought for a while and said, "Actually, it's very easy. Didn't she threaten to buy our house and tell other people not to sell it to us or rent it to us? She'll make us homeless, right? I don't know if other people will listen to her, but the owner of the residence we're living in right now will not sell it to her. For the time being, let her make a fuss. It's best if she makes a fuss until everyone knows. The more she makes a fuss now, the more people will know. In the future, no matter how high the price she offers, she won't be able to buy this residence. At that time, the price will fall even more and she will be ridiculed even more. Qin Yining couldn't help but sneer at this point. Qin Yining felt both angry and humiliated when she thought of Madame Lu's explicit gaze when she saw Pang Xiao and how she had categorized her as someone who could hug a handsome stranger. Qin Huaiyun heard this and said softly, "Doing this will indeed give the Marchioness of Zhongyong a slap in the face. But Sister Yi, don't forget that the Marchioness of Zhongyong has the Lu family behind her. What do century-old aristocratic families like the Lu family care about the most? They don't lack gold, silver, or fame. What they care about the most is their aristocratic family's reputation. By doing this, you can naturally make the Marchioness of Zhongyong suffer the consequences of her own actions. She won't be able to raise her head high in the capital. But doing this will also cause the Lu family to lose face. We just arrived into Zhou, so it's not wise for us to go tit for tat with the Lu family as soon as we arrive." Qin Huaiyuan's words caused Qin Yining to sink into deep thought. Indeed, no matter how bad Madame Lu was, she was from a side branch of the Lu family. In a century-old aristocratic family, even a dog would be more valuable than other people, let alone the daughter of a side branch. She had never interacted with anyone else in the Lu family. Mrs. Lu was the only one she knew. She was an arrogant, self-centered, and promiscuous woman. Qin Yining couldn't be sure that the rest of the Lu family were like this. But she couldn't be sure that the rest of the Lu family were all righteous people. They wouldn't act against the Lu family without distinguishing between right and wrong based on gratitude and grudges. Father is right. Qin Yining lowered her eyes and said, "It's your daughter's fault for not being considerate enough." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "There's no need to apologize. It's impossible not to get angry when you meet someone like that. Not to mention you, when Father heard about what happened at the banquet, even I wanted to confront her face to face. Not to mention you personally experienced it. I think that since the Lu family invited you to the banquet at the very beginning, it means that they originally wanted to be on good terms with our family. Because the Marchioness of Zhongyong married a good husband and is a member of the nobility, she was able to get along well with you, a young miss from an official's family. That's why they allowed her to invite you to the banquet." Chapter 360. That's true. I've heard of the Marquis of Zhongyong's heroic military exploits many times in the imperial court. He was a very remarkable man, but unfortunately, time didn't pass. Qin Huaiyuan sighed, feeling very regretful. Qin Yining also felt that it was a pity that the man had married such a wife. But in the end, she died in such a tragic way. Qin Huaiyuan then asked Qin Yining, "Sister Yi, Father wants to ask you, do you know why the Marquis of Zhongyong's wife is targeting you?" Qin Yining said, "She has a good relationship with Anyang Princess Royal, and Anyang Princess Royal hates me. So she also hates me." Qin Huaiyuan nodded. "What else?" Qin Yining thought for a moment, then said, "Based on her temperament, I think it's because she's always wanted to attract Pang Zhixin's attention, but failed, so she's unwilling to accept it. That's one of the reasons." "What else?" Qin Yining thought for a moment. Some ideas flashed through his mind, but he couldn't be sure. Qin Huaiyuan said, "Your Majesty conquered northern Ji with the financial support of the aristocratic families. However, after the war, when peace came, the aristocratic families clashed with the imperial power. The aristocratic families have deep roots, so your Majesty doesn't dare to act blindly without thinking. The aristocratic families also can't act blindly without thinking. For the past few years, the two of them have been wrestling with each other. On the surface, they've always been calm and peaceful. Although there have been many small frictions, it hasn't reached the point where they've completely fallen out. Qin Yining nodded, somewhat understanding. Qin Huayuan saw Qin Yining's expression, so he explained with a smile, Your Majesty, and the aristocratic families have been fighting for a long time. Your Majesty's struggle with the aristocratic families has been going on for a long time. All along, Your Majesty has relied on the military power in the hands of his trusted aides and nobles to fight to a draw with the aristocratic families. But Your Majesty is, after all, suspicious and does not completely trust the nobles. Just look at how he seized the military power of Pang Jishi, and this is enough to see. Your Majesty is also aware that some of the nobles have a grudge against him. I believe that Your Majesty has had many conflicts with the aristocratic families. The accumulated friction has caused the balance between Your Majesty and the aristocratic families to tilt. The imperial court is now in urgent need of new forces to help him balance the aristocratic families, the nobles, and the old officials of Northern Ji. But they don't want the new forces to be as difficult to control as the nobles who hold military power. After listening to Qin Huayuan's words, Qin Yining felt as if he had been enlightened. Father, I understand. Dayan officials like you who surrendered to Your Majesty are the forces that Your Majesty urgently needs. At first, I only knew that there were surrendered officials of Northern Ji and Your Majesty's trusted aides and nobles in Dezhou's imperial court, but I didn't know that there were other aristocratic families behind the scenes. After all, you were raised in the boudoir and had limited contact with people, so you didn't know everything, Qin Huayuan said with a smile. Once I tell you about this, you'll soon have a chance to succeed. Qin Yining's face reddened at Qin Huayuan's words, but he still said, thinking about it, those aristocratic families have existed for more than 100 years. Their foundation might be comparable to that of a country like Northern Ji. They have many descendants and are involved in all walks of life. They must have a wide network of connections in the imperial court. You're right, Qin Huayuan nodded and said, this is the power of aristocratic families, and also the reason why Your Majesty is afraid of them. The Great Zhou dynasty had only been established for a little over 3 years, less than 4 years. The Northern Ji country that it took over was riddled with holes, and its treasury was empty. The rebels of the Great Zhou dynasty were not all Orthodox soldiers. The peasant army that started the uprising also had many political problems. However, aristocratic families have existed for more than 100 years and have formed their own factions. Not to mention Your Majesty, even the former officials of Northern Ji and nobles like Pang Jishi have to be courteous when they see the Lu Min aristocratic family. So that's why Princess Royal of Anyang calls Madame Lu elder sister and is so polite to her? Yes, Qin Huan said in a low voice. Although Your Majesty is sitting on the throne, his heart is very uneasy. In the army that he leads, his prestige and voice can't be compared to that of Pang Jishi and Jilan. The Tiger Army and the Tiger Army are both amazing, but the Tiger Army is more of a headache for Your Majesty. This is because Pang Jishi is too charming. There are many people in the Tiger Army who are loyal to Pang Jishi, and there are many who want to die for him. Just by the fact that Pang Jishi can secretly mobilize the Tiger Army to look for you without using the Tiger Tally, you can see that. In comparison, Jilan is arrogant and cold. Although he is famous in the army, he is not as charming as Pang Jishi. The men in the Dragon Army are loyal to him and follow his orders, but they are not easy to mobilize. Qin Yining nodded and said, I understand. Your Majesty's trusted subordinates are the nobles who have military power. However, the two big shots among the nobles are unstable factors, especially Pang Jishi. This is why Your Majesty is suppressing Pang Jishi in every possible way. On one hand, Your Majesty took away his military power and gave him a battlefield among the civil officials. On the other hand, Your Majesty tried to sow discord between him and Jilan and made Jilan the son-in-law of the royal family. You are right. Qin Huayuan nodded. That is why Your Majesty's trusted subordinates are so troublesome, not to mention the aristocratic families that have provided Your Majesty with gold and silver. In the eyes of those aristocratic families, Your Majesty's rebel army might not even be able to reach the top. Furthermore, with the grudges between the surrendered officials of Beiji and your majesty, although they have surrendered, do you think that most of them do not have any regrets about dying to save their country? It is difficult to mediate between these forces. No wonder your majesty wants to take in the surrendered dying officials. You are right. Your majesty hopes to control the surrendered dying officials. Even if he cannot control them immediately, he can at least buy their hearts. Sending charcoal in snowy weather is often more memorable than adding flowers to a brocade. Qin Huaiyuan finished speaking and picked up the teacup to drink. The room became quiet, and only the red candle in the silk lamp emitted a bright light. Qin Yining pondered for a long time before saying, "Father, the way I wanted to deal with the Marchioness of Zhongyong was not appropriate. I was muddle-headed. Although it would be easy to tell my people not to sell the house to her, it would be a slap to the Marchioness of Zhongyong's face and also a slap to the Liu family's face. The loss would not be worth it. I think we need to think of a way to punish Madame Liu without offending the aristocratic families." Qin Huayan said, "We have just arrived, and it is indeed inappropriate to offend the Liu family at the beginning. But if we let a widow suppress us at the beginning, it will inevitably make people look down on us. Will more people follow suit in the future?" "Father's right." Qin Yining nodded in agreement. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. He lowered his voice and said, "Father, do you think this matter was arranged by your majesty?" Qin Huayan looked at Qin Yining, a smile appearing in his eyes again. "This is what I came to tell you tonight." Qin Yining thought for a moment and felt that the matter was more suspicious. The speed of his speech also became more urgent. Chapter 361. After the father and daughter analyzed the situation, they both understood what was going on. Li Qitian secretly instructed Li Helan to use Li Helan to instigate Madame Liu to achieve the current situation. At the same time, he was also secretly observing which side had the upper hand. Once the family Qin and the Liu family start fighting, not only will the imperial court be muddied, but more importantly, even if the family Qin is unexpectedly powerful and can suppress the aristocratic families, your majesty won't need your majesty's help. Your majesty will still be able to benefit. Qin Yining's eyes sparkled when she said this. She felt even more admiration for your majesty. If the family Qin and the Liu family become enemies, they will need a powerful backer. Your majesty is the best candidate for this backer. He will still be able to achieve his goal. Your majesty is truly unparalleled in wisdom. It's admirable." Qin Huaiyuan looked at Qin Yining with admiration. "Father knows that once I tell you something, you will be able to analyze the situation thoroughly and make the right choice." Qin Yining's face flushed red from the praise. She quickly waved her hands modestly. "Father, the most appropriate thing for us to do next is to not offend the aristocratic families and punish Madame Liu." "That's right," Qin Huaiyuan said. "We can't let a woman suppress us and make others look down on us. However, we can't offend the Liu family either. We have to control this well. Moreover, according to my analysis, this matter with the Liu family will blow up in a few days. However, you don't have to be afraid. Father naturally has a way to deal with them." Qin Yining's expression became serious when she heard this. "Father, the imperial court is so chaotic, and we haven't gained a firm foothold yet. What happens next will definitely be even more chaotic. Can we deal with it?" Qin Huaiyuan couldn't help but laugh when he saw Qin Yining acting like a little girl. "Silly girl, when the water is too clear, there will be no fish. It's better when it's chaotic." Qin Huaiyuan stood up, brushing away the creases on his sleeves and hem. "I'll give you a few silver mask spies who are loyal and steady to protect you. The people trained by the Chao family not only have their own strengths, but they also keep their mouths shut. As long as the money is given, they can be as loyal as they were to the previous emperor." At this point, Qin Huaiyuan laughed. "As for the money to hire them, I don't care. Now, Sister E is a landowner. Her salary is much better than mine." Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle when he heard this. Father is already such a powerful person. Why would he care about such a small amount of money? Qin Huaiyuan waved his hand and said seriously, "What are you talking about? You are the one who bought the house. Your father is an honest official, and my salary is limited. Alas, these days he had to give silver to silver masked spies, and he had almost emptied his savings. Now that I've given it to you, it's perfect, Qin Yining said with a laugh. Father, you're too cunning. Qin Huaiyuan looked at Qin Yining and also laughed. However, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a tall and big figure on the ground in front of the cleaning room. Qin Huaiyuan was stunned at first, but then he understood and smiled. He casually took the silk lamp and placed it on the square table near the cleaning room. As the bright light approached, the figure on the ground was immediately diluted. Qin Yining's back was facing the cleaning room, so he didn't see the figure there. Yexian thought that Pang Xiao had already jumped out of the window and left, so she asked Qin Huaiyuan curiously, Father, why did you move the silk lamp? Qin Huaiyuan smiled and stood next to the square table where the silk lamp was placed, his back facing the cleaning room. He was only 2 steps away from where Pang Xiao was hiding behind the door frame. Silly girl, look. When the light is placed here, doesn't the light and shadow in the room change? Qin Yining looked around and nodded blankly. There is a change. That's why light and shadow are born together. When you see darkness, you don't have to panic. The light source must be not far away. Moreover, the imperial court is constantly changing. Isn't it like this lamp? If you casually move your hand and are blocked by a few tables and chairs, the shadows and the darkness will also change. As Qin Huaiyuan spoke, he smiled at Qin Yining and walked out. It's getting late. You should rest. Father's going back. Qin Yining and Qin Huaiyuan had analyzed things very clearly today. She only didn't understand the last sentence. What light? What shadow? When the door creaked open, she heard Qin Huaiyuan instructing the servant girls to be on night duty and not to be negligent. Qin Yining shook her head in confusion and turned around. She glanced at the position of the silk lamp and curiously picked it up and put it back in its original position. Then she stood at Qin Huaiyuan's position and looked around the room. Unexpectedly, when she turned around, she saw the tall figure reflected on the floor in front of the cleaning room from the corner of her eye. Qin Yining's face turned red with a bang. She quickly rushed into the cleaning room and lifted the curtain hanging at the door. She saw Pang Xiao leaning against the wall of the door, deep in thought. She couldn't help but hit him and said in a low voice, What are you thinking about? Didn't you leave? My father found you. Pang Xiao looked a little confused. What? Qin Yining pointed to an open back window not far away. The moonlight tonight was very bright and spilled generously into the cleaning room through the open window. It also cast a long shadow on the floor where Pang Xiao was standing at the door. Pang Xiao immediately slapped his forehead. A mistake. I had just pushed open the window and wanted to leave, but then I remembered that father-in-law is extremely intelligent. He must have something important to say to you, so I stayed to listen. Father-in-law's words really made me feel enlightened. But even this shadow could be seen by father-in-law. He is really too powerful. Qin Yining looked askance at Pang Xiao and gave him a hard pinch. Pretend you're still pretending. You don't know what kind of person I am? If you were so stupid, you wouldn't even know that the moonlight is so bright and leave a shadow on the floor. You would have been eaten by others all these years. You clearly did it on purpose. It's because County Wang Fei came to my house, right? Pang Zhishi, can you not be so petty? I don't have anything to do with County Wang Fei. Not to mention that he is now County Wang Fei. Even if he was the emperor in the past, I wouldn't care if he wanted to make me empress. You are still so petty. You use this method to tell my father that our relationship is very close. How do you want my father to guess? What do you want me to do? Qin Yining was so angry that she almost cried. She felt very ashamed when she thought that her father might have seen the figure on the ground when she was talking with her father just now and guessed that she was having a private meeting with Pang Zhishi in the middle of the night. Chapter 362. What do you mean by don't think too much? Father was clearly saving me some face. My reputation has been ruined by you. Qin Yining's tears rolled down her cheeks. When Pang Xiao saw that she was crying, he became even more flustered. Don't cry. I know I was wrong, okay? I won't do this again. I also care about you. I'm afraid that father-in-law will betroth you to the county king of Yin because of our old relationship as ruler and subject. What should I do then? How can I justify myself if my good wife is taken away by someone else? When Pang Xiao was anxious, he stopped speaking in official language and even revealed his northern accent. Qin Yining was born in the south, so she rarely heard the authentic northern accent of Pang Xiao's maternal grandparents. She felt that the accent was very interesting, and it was also very simple and warm. When she heard Pang Xiao's words, she stopped crying and burst out laughing. She said angrily, "You're so thick-skinned. What do you mean by remind you? Father was clearly talking about your shadow on the ground." Yes. It's my shadow, not me. Everything you said is correct." Pang Xiao smiled shyly and used his sleeve to wipe Qin Yining's face. He used too much strength in his carelessness, and even rubbed Qin Yining's cheek until it burned. Qin Yining retreated in pain and glared at him. She said angrily, "Why aren't you leaving? What are you still doing here?" When Pang Xiao saw Qin Yining blushing like an angry rabbit, he was very happy. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her a few times. Qin Yining was so angry that her face and ears turned red. If it wasn't for the fact that her sisters lived nearby, she would have cursed out loud. In the end, she tore the Pang family's dog skin ointment off her body with great difficulty. She was so tired that she was sweating all over. Pang Xiao kissed her again reluctantly and said, "I'm leaving. I'm really leaving." Qin Yining kicked him angrily. "Get lost." It was true that a rabbit would bite when cornered. This was too fun. Pang Xiao laughed inwardly as he nimbly jumped out of the back window. Qin Yining watched as he leaped onto the wall like a black leopard hunting for its prey in the dark. His movements were light and agile, and he disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Qin Yining hurriedly closed the window. She went back to her room and crawled into bed. Covering her head with the quilt, Qin Yining thought about what had happened just now. She was really embarrassed. She secretly cursed that shameless fellow again. The next morning, Qin Yining was sitting in front of the dressing table while Xian Yun and Bing Tang helped her comb her hair. She was holding the jasmine mints that Bing Tang had made for her. She dug them into the size of beans and spread them evenly on the back of her hands and wrists. Lian Xiaozhou immediately leaned closer to Qin Yining and took a few deep breaths. "Sister, it smells so good." Qin Yining laughed. "Later, I'll ask your sister Bing Tang to apply some for you too." Lian Xiaozhou nodded repeatedly and looked at Bing Tang with a smile. Bing Tang neatly twisted a lock of Qin Yining's long black hair behind her head and fixed it with a small golden hairpin. "Miss, you only know how to dote on her. You've spoiled her so much." Although her tone was sour, it was obvious that she was joking. Lian Xiaozhou grabbed the purse hanging on her waist and sniffed it. Then she shook it at Bing Tang. Qin Yining laughed and said, "Don't underestimate little Kanji. She knows everything. You give her good things and treat her well. She knows all about it. Isn't that right, little Kanji?" Lian Xiaozhou nodded repeatedly. Sister Bing Tang, okay. It was an unchangeable fact that she lacked the ability to speak. Bing Tang cherished her even more. Usually, it would give her all the delicious food and fun things it had. It even took the initiative to teach her about herbs and how to read. It usually took care of Lian Xiaozhou more carefully than it did of Qin Yining. Lian Xiaozhou was extremely smart. Although she couldn't say it out loud, she knew everything in her heart. How could she not know that Bing Tang was good to her? Therefore, she treated Bing Tang as another sister and was very close to it. Usually, she wouldn't forget to give more Bing Tang skewers when she caught some birds to barbecue. However, the house was small now. She had to go to the back alley to barbecue skewers where there was no one around. It was very troublesome. "Hello, Mrs. Chow." Qiu Lu's voice came from outside the door. The curtain was lifted and Xiao Yuqing, who was wearing a dark blue fur collar cloak, walked in. Ever since Xiao Yuqing told the family that she was no longer Qin Huayuan's concubine and was now a bodyguard hired by Qin Huayuan, they no longer called her concubine. Because of her age and the fact that she had remarried twice, They called her Mrs. Chow instead. Chow Yuqing smiled at Qin Yining, who was sitting in front of the dressing table. She smiled and said, "I'm early. Mrs. Chow, please sit down." Qiu Lu, quickly bring a bowl of almond tea to Mrs. Chow. He turned around and smiled. I asked them to make almond tea this morning. It's very good to drink with little dessert. Mrs. Chow, do you want to try it? Okay. Chow Yuqing smiled. Her smile was as beautiful as a peach and plum. When she looked at Qin Yining, her eyes sparkled as if she could see someone far away through her face. Qin Yining didn't think too much about it. She quickly tied up her hair and put on 2 pearl earrings without putting on any makeup. Then she sat at the square table with a smile and moved the tea and snacks brought by Qiu Lu to Chow Yuqing. Try it. Chow Yuqing took it with a smile. She elegantly took a sip and tasted it carefully. She smiled and said, "It's really good." Chow Yuqing put down the teacup and said with a smile, "I'm here today because His Excellency asked me to bring you 4 bodyguards. These 4 people are all steady and have good martial arts skills. They're the best people to protect you." She stood up and went to the door. She called in 4 young men of average height and ordinary appearance. The 4 of them bowed in unison. Chow Yuqing introduced them one by one. "This is Jing Zhe, young man, Xiao Shui, and Dehan." Qin Yining looked at them as she introduced them. Jing Zhe was taller and had a kind face. Young man was more delicate and looked like a girl. Xiao Shui had dark skin, thick eyebrows, and a big mouth. It was a stark contrast to his name. Dehan looked the oldest. He was expressionless, and no one could tell whether he liked or disliked him. Although the 4 of them had their own characteristics, their appearances weren't outstanding. It was difficult to distinguish them in a crowd. Qin Yining smiled and said, "They're all named after the solar terms." Yes, they weren't originally named like that. However, it was a rule set by that person. The 24 solar terms were used as code names. If they were lost, there would be new ones to replace them. Jingzhe is good at martial arts. Young man is good at disguise. Xiao Shui is the best at lightness skills. Dehan is steady and experienced. He can see the opportunity and is quick-witted. They're all very loyal. Master also carefully selected the 4 of them to follow you. Chow Yuqing sat down next to Qin Yining. She smiled and looked at the subordinates she had painstakingly trained. She was very satisfied. Qin Yining said solemnly, "Thank you, Madam Chow, for putting in so much effort. I understand your good intentions. In the future, when the 4 of them follow me, I will definitely treat them well." Chapter 363. Father and Madam Chow are so considerate. Qin Yining stood up with a smile and looked back at Xian Yun. Xian Yun paused and immediately went to take out the money pouch and gave each of the 4 people a 100-tael banknote. Qin Yining saw that Xian Yun was so quick-witted and sighed inwardly that Peng Zhao's people were also well-trained. She smiled and said, "I'll give these to everyone as pocket money first. As long as everyone is loyal to me, our good days in the future are still ahead of us." The 4 people's faces lit up and they bowed and said, "Yes, Mississippi." Qin Yining nodded and said, "You can leave first. When I go out later, if I have something to tell you, I'll ask my personal maid to invite you. When you go out later, you can get to know the people around me." Qin Yining turned back and instructed Xian Yun and Ji Yun. The 2 went out with the 4 people and introduced Bing Tang, Qiu Lu, and Lian Xiaozhou to them. Chow Yuqing saw that Qin Yining was so generous and gave each of them 100 taels when they met. She knew that she was a sensible person and felt relieved. She chatted with Qin Yining for a while and then left. Not long after, Ji Yun returned to Qin Yining and praised in a low voice, "They're worthy of being silver-masked secret agents." Although this servant didn't fight with them, from their walking posture and aura, they're different from ordinary martial artists. Master really cares about you. Qin Yining thought of Qin Huaiyuan's understanding and tolerance towards her and couldn't help but be moved and said, "Yes, Father is really good to me. He doesn't control me like other fathers. Instead, he considers my feelings and thinks about me from my point of view. He allows me to live freely." Xian Yun, Bing Tang, Qiu Lu, and Lian Xiaozhou also returned to the room. Xian Yun was touched as well, and she said, After serving Miss, I've finally witnessed the graceful bearing of the #1 minister of Great Yin. Master has indeed lived up to his reputation. Not only is he kind to us servants, but he also treats Miss well. What Xian Yun did not mention was that Master actually cared more about his daughter than Madam. Xian Yun had been with Qin Yining for a long time, so she didn't know much about the Sun Clan. If she knew what the Sun Clan was like in the past, she would be amazed by how much the Sun Clan had changed. Qin Yining went to pay his respects to old Madam and the Sun Clan. Then, he planned to go out and find Master Zhong. Her father had explained the reason to her, but he did not doubt her actions, nor did he direct her actions. He only gave her enough people to ensure her safety and let her do as she wished. How could Qin Yining betray his father's trust? Qin Yining ordered people to prepare a carriage. Then he went to inform the Sun Clan, "Daughter wants to go to the market in the city. Since arriving in the capital, I haven't looked around in detail. I also want to go to a tea house." The Sun Clan couldn't help but laugh. "I've never seen you so playful before. All right, call a few more people to follow you. Do you have enough money on you?" The Sun Clan turned around and instructed Mother Jean. Mother Jean smiled and took out a brocade box from the mahogany cabinet. Then, she took out a small brocade pouch from the box. Inside this pouch are all the banknotes from Bijou that have been exchanged. Madam had already ordered them to be prepared. Since Miss is going today, you'll be able to use them. Qin Yining knew that his mother had some personal connections. Her dowry farmstead also had some production in the south. However, she didn't lack money at the moment, so she was a bit hesitant. The Sun Clan took the brocade pouch and shoved it into Qin Yining's hands. "Go and carefully choose the materials for your clothes. You should also buy yourself a few sets of clothes. When you came here, you lost quite a bit of jewelry. Go and see if there's anything new or nice to look at. If you don't have enough money, come back and tell me." Qin Yining smiled and hugged the Sun Clan's arm. She said coquettishly, "I know. My mother is so rich. I won't save money for you." The Sun Clan laughed at her teasing. Mother Jean was delighted to see this. She also laughed heartily. If old Madam knew that Madam and young Miss are doing well, I wonder how happy she would be. Qin Yining sat up straight and said, "I don't know where maternal grandmother and maternal aunt went. Mother, do you want me to think of a way to ask someone to investigate?" The Sun Clan's face was filled with worry as she said, "I really want to investigate, but the sky is high and the road is far away. It's not very convenient. I talked to your father about this matter a few days ago. Your Majesty said that right now, Your Majesty is sending people to the south to search for the treasure left behind by the dying Emperor Emeritus. Your Majesty has already arranged for several groups of people to go there. If our family sends people out at this time, it will inevitably arouse suspicion. It's better to avoid the limelight for now. Father's considerations are thorough. Mother, it's naturally inappropriate for us to act rashly." Qin Yining had already made up his mind. He planned to secretly contact people from the Qing-Tian alliance to investigate. However, he didn't know if this matter would succeed, so he didn't say it out loud. After thinking about it, Qin Yining said, "However, Mother doesn't need to be too worried. Maternal grandmother is extremely intelligent, and maternal aunt are all filial. Even if they go to a foreign place, maternal grandmother has the ability to rebuild the Sun family. I believe that your maternal grandmother can do it," the Sun Clan's mother said faintly. "However, I still feel that your maternal grandmother's life is too bitter." Thinking about the Sun family's men who had died in vain, Qin Yining's eyes also became wet with tears along with the Sun Clan's. Her eldest cousin's resolute blood was spilled on the spot. Her maternal grandfather and maternal uncles had entrusted their lives to her before they died. Her maternal nephew, who was still young, had also died. Those lively lives had all fallen because of a single sentence from the fatuous ruler. Now, the fatuous ruler's whereabouts were unknown. No one knew if he was dead or alive. Qin Yining guessed that the old man was most likely dead. The famine was so severe back then. How could a person who was used to living like a prince have the ability to survive outside? However, even if that person was dead, it still couldn't calm Qin Yining's anger. After chatting with the Sun Clan's mother for a while, Qin Yining took the pocket money that his mother gave him and called for Ji Yun and Bing Tang to follow him. He brought Jing Zhe, Young Man, Xiao Shui, and a Han out of the mansion. In front of the door, a carriage with a green curtain was already prepared. Qin Yining and the two maidservants boarded the carriage. Young Man and Xiao Shui jumped onto the shaft of the carriage and sat on it. Jing Zhe led the horse in front, while De Han followed behind the carriage. Unexpectedly, they had only taken a few steps out of the alley when they bumped into a spacious blue cotton curtain carriage. As soon as the curtain was lifted, a middle-aged woman in her early 30s, with a fit figure and dressed in gold and silver, poked her head out. "Is that Sister Qin's carriage?" Qin Yining curiously lifted the curtain and saw that the woman had already gotten out of the carriage. She gathered her cloak and walked towards them. Her joyful smile was very infectious. "Sister Qin, I'm from the Liao family. Have you forgotten? The Liao Zhibing who was in the silk and jewelry business in Dian. Liao Zhibing, wasn't that one of the 4 hall masters of the Qing-Tian alliance? The one whose knife skills were quite fierce." Qin Yining immediately understood that the Qing-Tian alliance had arranged for someone to contact her in order to avoid being noticed. She hurriedly laughed. "Oh, it's Mrs. Liao. Look at my memory." Qin Yining also got out of the carriage and went forward to greet Mrs. Liao. He asked affectionately, "I thought you would stay in Dian. Why did you come to the capital?" "Ah, we're doing business. Of course, we'll go wherever it's good. Old Liao is now doing some business at the Taitan border. As for me, I stayed at home in the capital to look after the house. Today, I felt that the weather was good, so I came out for a walk. I didn't expect to meet Sister Qin. We're really fated." Qin Yining also laughed. Ji Yun and Bing Tang, who were next to Qin Yining, looked at each other. They silently thought that this person was very unfamiliar. However, they knew that their lady always had a sense of propriety. They thought that there must be some reason that they didn't know, so the two of them didn't say much. Jing Zhe and the other 3 saw that this person wasn't dangerous, so they just stood aside, quietly like ordinary family members, and waited. Qin Yining and Mrs. Liao chatted happily. Mrs. Liao said, "It's really nice to meet an old friend in a foreign land. Sister Qin, are you free now? It's better to meet by chance than by invitation. Why don't I be the host and book a private room at Fushan Restaurant? We sisters can have a good chat, okay?" "Of course, but now that my father has settled down in the capital, I'm also considered a citizen of the capital. Why don't I be the host? Wouldn't it be better if Mrs. Liao invites me next time?" "Of course, that's great," Mrs. Liao said with a smile. "Then let's go now. Please, please." The two of them politely said a few words. Then they got on their respective carriages and set off in the direction of Fushan Restaurant. They waited until they were far away. The window of a carriage parked on the side of the road was pushed open. Mrs. Liu's exquisitely made-up face was full of ridicule. She's really a lowly person who can't climb the high platform. She's the daughter of a dignified official of the imperial court, but she even befriends the wife of a merchant. The servant girl by Madame Liu's side said flatteringly, "Isn't that so? I've heard of many win-win situations between officials and merchants. Perhaps the Qin family is truly in dire straits now and lacks money, so they made this move. Didn't they say that the family Qin's belongings were robbed on the way here? Look at the small courtyard they live in. It's not even enough to raise a pond of fish for Madame." These words made Mrs. Liu's heart feel very comfortable. She glanced at the maidservant approvingly and lazily said, "Don't say that. The capital is rich and expensive. It's already good enough for a small family to have a place to stay. How can they choose so much?" The maidservant hurriedly slapped her own face. It's this servant's knowledge that is short. Although this servant is lowly, it's fortunate to come to the Liu family to serve Madame. After seeing the Liu family's appearance, I don't find anything pleasing to the eye. "You little hussy." Mrs. Liu smiled cheerfully and then asked, "Where did they say they were going? Fushan Restaurant?" "Yes." When Mrs. Liu heard this, she had a plan in her heart. She immediately called the servant beside her to give a few instructions. The servant hurriedly spurred the horse to run. Mrs. Liu closed the window and urged the coachman to go as fast as possible. Chapter 364. Seeing that there was no one else around, Mrs. Liao solemnly bowed to Qin Yining and whispered, "Alliance Master, I apologize for offending you earlier." Qin Yining hurriedly got up and supported her. "You don't need to be so polite. Please get up." Mrs. Liao sat back in her seat again and said, "Originally, everyone thought that since we have never met before, they were afraid that I would be caught by your guards. Fortunately, you are smart and recognized me immediately." Qin Yining smiled and said, "You said that you were home Master Liao's wife. How can I not know who you are? You're a rich young lady. It is inconvenient for those uncouth people to be around you. Therefore, everyone came up with an idea to let me be responsible for contacting you in the future. If you have any instructions, you can tell me directly. This way, you can avoid embarrassment." Qin Yining said, "It's hard for you to be so careful. Did you come here alone this time? Or did everyone leave Diane?" Mrs. Liao's face flashed with embarrassment. Then she smiled and said, replying to the Alliance Master, "Now our alliance only has 100 or so core people left. Everyone thought that since they don't have to oppose the tyranny of Diane, they still have to eat. Therefore, they focused on business. The 4 Hall Masters discussed and decided to do business at the Tayton border." "Do business at the Tayton border? With Tayton people?" "Yes. Otherwise, we wouldn't go so far away." Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and said, "Your idea is good, but the world is so big. Where can't you do business? Although Dezhou and Tayton have stopped fighting due to internal strife, the 2 countries have not resumed trade, right? Do you know that your actions are smuggling?" "Oh, Alliance Master, don't scare me. If this matter is not publicized, then it is business. If someone reports it, then it is smuggling. What's more, don't we have you above us? You've always been resourceful, and your father is a second-ranked AUN. Our connections are deep, so even if someone were to report us one day, we wouldn't be afraid." She didn't expect Mrs. Liao to pull out the tricks she used in the marketplace and start to act shamelessly. Qin Yining's face darkened. He chuckled and said slowly, "When the old Alliance Master passed the position of Alliance Master to me, I rejected it in every possible way. I was young and inexperienced. How could I deserve to be the Alliance Master of the Green Sky Alliance? You are all famous chivalrous warriors in Jianghu, but I'm just a little girl who was raised in a boudoir with long hair and short knowledge." But back then, it was the 4 Hall Masters who agreed with the old Alliance Master and insisted that I take this position. At that time, I was overjoyed as I felt that all the brothers of Green Heaven Alliance were heroes who were determined to bring justice to the common people under the heaven, warriors of justice who opposed the tyranny of Great Yan's self-indulgent monarch. Therefore, I felt both ashamed and proud to be the leader of Green Heaven Alliance. Mrs. Liao was an old member of the Qingtian Alliance. When she heard the words, she naturally sat up straight and said with a little pride, "We, the Qingtian Alliance, are naturally righteous people. But the righteous people are now doing smuggling business?" Mrs. Liao's face changed. Just as she was about to argue, Qin Yining raised his hand and said slowly, "I know that there are some words that you may not listen to even if I say them. My title as the Alliance Master is just an empty title. You have never treated me as the Alliance Master in private. Don't you ask for my opinion before making a decision? Are you waiting for me to take the blame when something happens? You're making it sound a little too unpleasant. We have always done things in an open and above-board manner. When did we catch someone to take the blame?" "Mrs. Liao, don't worry." Qin Yining waved his hand and said, "Stopping people from making money is equivalent to killing their family. I won't stop you from doing business. Besides, you won't listen to what I say now. I'm afraid you will only think of me when something really happens. But in any case, I hope you don't forget the original intention when you established the Qingtian Alliance. Money and beauty can charm the eyes and deceive people's hearts. You can make money, but you can't do evil." Mrs. Liao's face alternated between red and white from Qin Yining's words. When she came, she had already prepared a stomach full of excuses. She thought that a rich young lady would be so proud of herself that she couldn't find north after putting on a few more flattering hats. She would just casually coax her. But when she looked into Qin Yining's beautiful eyes and listened to her words that pierced people's hearts, she couldn't say a single coaxing word. The reason why her words pierced people's hearts was because what Qin Yining said was the truth. Indeed, some of these people had such intentions. No wonder before she came, Qiao Shangfei specifically told her to be respectful to the Alliance Master. At first, she thought that it was because the four Hall Masters respected the old Alliance Master, so they were especially respectful to the old Alliance Master's granddaughter. Now it seemed that she thought too simply. Alliance Master. Mrs. Liao's expression became serious and said, "I have remembered your words. I will definitely tell them later." Qin Yining nodded and said, "That's good. Is there anything else that you need from me this time?" Mrs. Liao didn't expect Qin Yining to ask directly. Instead, she felt a little embarrassed. Her mission this time was to meet with Qin Yining and tell Qin Yining about their smuggling in Tayton. This was in case she needed Qin Yining's help one day in the future, so she wouldn't be ignorant about their matters. But if she said there's nothing else now, it would show that her goal was extremely utilitarian. Although they had indeed come here for the sake of material gains, they were still able to do so. Mrs. Liao, who was already over 30 years old, was now in front of the 16-year-old Qin Yining. She couldn't even raise her head. The corner of her lips trembled, and after a while, she said, "I'm mainly worried about the Alliance Master. I heard that the Alliance Master's family had a small accident on their way to the capital." "That's right. It was a small accident." Qin Yining smiled. "It seems that the main forces in the Alliance have moved to Tayton?" Mrs. Liao didn't immediately understand what Qin Yining meant. She asked in confusion, "Why does the Alliance Master say that? If that's not the case, then the Alliance's intelligence system needs to be strengthened." Mrs. Liao immediately understood the sarcasm in Qin Yining's words, and her face immediately turned red like a cooked shrimp. The Qingtian Alliance was once popular in Dian. How could they not know what happened when the Qin family came to Dezhou? It was just that everyone didn't take it to heart. Now that they were doing business in Tayton, they were afraid that they couldn't handle some things, so they came to find the Alliance Master. Previously, when the Alliance Master was robbed and disappeared, they didn't react at all. If they admitted that there was no problem with their intelligence system, then it meant that there was a problem with the Alliance members. If there wasn't a problem with the Alliance members, then how could she face Qin Yining? Mrs. Liao's embarrassed face turned red, and she was a bit more in awe of Qin Yining. No wonder the old Alliance Master passed the position of the Alliance Master to her. This girl was really not an ordinary person. When facing her, Mrs. Liao even had the illusion that she was facing the old Alliance Master. When Qin Yining saw Mrs. Liao's expression, he knew that today's warning was enough. If he continued to say more, it would be counterproductive. Therefore, he timely changed the topic and learned about the situation in the capital with Mrs. Liao. Mrs. Liao secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She was very grateful for Qin Yining's forgiveness. When she spoke to her, her attitude became extremely respectful. She no longer had the irreverent attitude she had when talking to Qin Yining. Qin Yining deliberately gave her a way out, and Mrs. Liao deliberately flattered her. The atmosphere of the two people's conversation suddenly became warm, just like when they first met, as if they were good friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. Standing at the corner of the stairs, Jingzhe and the other three secret agents now had a deeper understanding of Qin Yining. At first, they thought that Qin Huayun arranged for them to be by Qin Yining's side was a waste of talent. They didn't expect her to have the identity of the Alliance Master of the Qingtian Alliance. Seeing how she made the disloyal members of the Alliance respectful to her with just a few words, the four of them seemed to see a day where they could still show their skills. In their hearts, their position of Qin Yining also changed. Just as Qin Yining and Mrs. Liao were eating and chatting, there was a sudden noise downstairs. At first, the two didn't care, but the noise became sharper and sharper. They could vaguely hear someone's heavy footsteps on the wooden steps. Qin Yining frowned and looked at the stairs. Young man immediately went downstairs to investigate. Before the results of the investigation could be found, the noise and curses had already reached their ears. "You asked my madam to wait?" Do you know who my madam is? Who do you think you are? Can you afford to delay my madam's business? What do you mean by reserved? I'm slapping the banknotes on your face right now. Do you dare say that Fushan restaurant won't be reserved for my madam? That's just a minister's daughter. Who does she think she is? My madam is the legitimate daughter of the Liu family. The maidservant's voice was sharp and resounding. It was extremely unreasonable. Her voice was getting louder and louder, making Qin Yining frown. She didn't need to go out to see who was making trouble downstairs. A young man quickly went upstairs and said to Qin Yining, a man and a woman came to the hall on the first floor. The noise was made by that woman's maidservant. Qin Yining nodded, indicating that he knew. Another voice came from downstairs. Tell that whatever minister's daughter to come down. Our madam will talk to her personally. Go quickly. Miss, Jian was very angry. Her face was red as she said, those people are simply too much. This servant will go down and teach them a lesson. No need. Qin Yining stood up and said, I will go by myself. I want to see how merciless they will be to a small minister's daughter. Yes, this servant will help you. When Bing Tang saw that Qin Yining didn't intend to swallow his anger, she immediately helped Qin Yining down the stairs with high fighting spirit. Jian also followed by the side. She looked like she was going to rush forward and tear them apart. Mrs. Liao was stunned. She didn't expect the maidservant of a rich young lady to be so fierce. Or was it that master, servant? A group of people went down the stairs. Jingzhe and Han followed behind. Young Man and Xiao Shui led the way in front. In the middle, there were two pretty maidservants supporting a beautiful woman who was dressed simply and elegantly. This combination immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the hall on the first floor of the restaurant. Qin Yining was a little surprised. He thought that since the other party wanted to reserve the restaurant, there was no one else on the first floor. He didn't expect that this place wasn't cleared. Chapter 365. Although there weren't many diners in the hall, there were still quite a few of them. Even though Qin Yining was wearing a veil, she could still feel the gazes of the crowd as she slowly walked forward with the help of the maidservants. At this moment, Madame Liu was sitting by the window in the hall. Although she had her chin raised arrogantly with a mocking smile on her beautiful face, if one looked closely, it wasn't difficult to detect the jealousy and hatred in her eyes. Madame Liu was an extremely beautiful woman, and she loved it when men's gazes stopped on her body. However, the moment Qin Yining went downstairs, she heard that all the chatter and chewing sounds in the huge hall on the first floor had stopped. No one even continued to pick up food. Even her second cousin brother, whom she had always respected, stopped pouring wine for her. It was good to be young. If she were 10 years younger, she believed that these people's eyes would be glued to her body and they wouldn't have the heart to look at anyone else. Qin Yining met Madame Liu's disdainful and provocative gaze and smiled slightly. The thin veil covered the dimples on her cheeks, but her bright almond-shaped eyes were curved into crescent moons. Her appearance was bright and beautiful, and there was a hint of playfulness in it. I didn't expect to meet Madame Liu here. I think the shopkeeper of Fushan restaurant didn't serve you well enough, and that's why Big Sister Liu's maidservants were so noisy. I heard the commotion downstairs from my private room on the 3rd floor. Madame Liu sneered and said, You don't have to worm your way into being friends with me. Didn't you say that it was beneath your dignity to interact with our Liu family? I don't deserve to be called Big Sister by you. Hurry up and leave with your men. I've already reserved this entire restaurant. Qin Yining raised her brows slightly, and her eyes shone brightly. Big Sister Liu has already reserved this place? Yes. Do you want me to repeat myself? Hurry up and leave. Don't stay here and make a fool of yourself. Madame Liu's tone was extremely rude. Qin Yining nodded and said, Big Sister Liu's memory isn't very good. I specifically asked the shopkeeper when I came here, and he said that I reserved the entire 3rd floor because it was empty. Now Big Sister Liu says that you've already reserved it? May I ask, Big Sister Liu, why didn't the shopkeeper mention this? That old thing's memory isn't good. Are you leaving or not? Madame Liu was anxious. Qin Yining laughed mockingly, and her laughter was as clear and melodious as a silver bell. How interesting. Big sister, lose your own memory, but you're saying that the shopkeeper has a bad memory. Let me ask you, if you've already reserved this restaurant, then how did all the diners on the first floor? No matter how bad the manager's memory was, it was already a mistake to only let one person in. Could it be that so many diners were let in because of the manager's bad memory? Big sister Lu's, Madame Lu, Madame, and Madame Lu of Madams. This is Madame, SDS. Madame Lu. She was so focused on embarrassing Qin Yining that she forgot about this. Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle. She wasn't angry at being made difficult for her. Her cheerful laughter made the surrounding diners laugh as well. In an instant, the atmosphere in the hall, which had been disturbed by Madame Lu's servant girl, became relaxed again. Everyone's impression of Qin Yining was 10,000 times better than the unruly, domineering, and unreasonable Madame Lu. As Qin Yining chuckled, her beautiful eyes swept over the young man beside Madame Lu. She sized him up discreetly. This person was about 25 or 26 years old. He had an outstanding and unrestrained temperament. His sitting posture was languid and relaxed, and his every movement exuded a graceful and noble air. Although his temperament was outstanding, it didn't carry any aggressiveness. Instead, it gave people a feeling of gentleness. The first thing one would notice when they first saw him wasn't his facial features. Just his temperament alone was enough to make people lower their eyes and not dare to look him in the eye. Qin Yining inexplicably thought of a phrase. Aristocratic families have a natural aristocratic aura. At this time, Madame Lu's face was red from being laughed at by everyone. She was used to being arrogant and domineering. Even the eldest princess of Anyang had to call her elder sister. Now, she was being laughed at in front of everyone. Madame Lu gritted her teeth and coldly said, "I think you're clearly making an enemy of my Lu family." Qin Yining blinked and said with a smile, "Aristocratic families don't rely on using power to oppress others. Instead, they rely on grace and experience accumulated over time. The person beside you is one such example. As for you, only with self-respect can you obtain love and respect. You can't rely on your loud voice and threats to gain respect." Madame Lu angrily slammed the table and angrily stood up to curse. "Who do you think you are? You're just a piece of trash that has been played with enough. Why don't you find a corner to hide in and instead walk around outside? Since you're a piece of trash, don't go out and embarrass yourself. You're annoying for no reason." Qin Yining's eyes turned cold. Young Man and Xiao Shui were already standing in front of Qin Yining. Ji Yun and Bing Tang were also angrily glaring. It was as if as long as Qin Yining said a word, they would tear Madame Lu apart and feed her to the dogs. In this tense situation, who would have thought that the one to speak would be the youth? "Cousin Huan, you've gone too far. Why aren't you apologizing to this girl yet?" Madame Lu was stunned. She looked at the youth in shock and said in disbelief, "Second brother Hung. How can you help an outsider like this?" Lu Hung stood up, with his tall and thin figure and powerful aura, with just a glance. Madame Lu was suppressed to the point that she couldn't say another word. How could she forget that Lu Hung wasn't her biological brother, but her cousin in the clan? Her family was only one of the branches of the Lu family. Lu Hung was the second son of the main branch of the Lu family. When her biological brother saw Lu Hung, he had to be respectful and curry favor with him. She must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts to actually shout at Lu Hung. She glared at Qin Yining, who was watching the show from the side. If she didn't deliberately provoke her, how could she lose her composure like this? Madame Lu became more and more angry. Lu Hung frowned and said, "I didn't expect you to be so arrogant and despotic outside." What this girl said just now was right. The background of an aristocratic family has never depended on force to suppress others. Aren't you afraid that you'll ruin the reputation of the Lu family that has been built up for hundreds of years? Your father and brother didn't even bother to discipline you and let you do as you please. You even dare to distort the truth and deceive me. Even when Lu Heng was scolding people, his voice was elegant and gentle. He didn't raise his voice or speed up his speech. Perhaps those who were a little further away couldn't hear what he was saying, but his powerful aura made Madame Lu break out in cold sweat. Second brother Heng, don't be angry. I was reckless. Madame Lu lowered her head. Lu Heng looked at Qin Yining and accidentally met Qin Yining's watery eyes. Lu Heng's eyelashes flickered and he lowered his eyes, as if he felt that avoiding her gaze was inappropriate. He quickly raised his eyes and smiled at Qin Yining. Then he turned to Madame Lu and said, "The person you should apologize to isn't me, but the girl you insulted." When Madame Lu heard this, her face immediately turned purple. She said in disbelief, "Second brother Heng, you actually want me to apologize to this slut? Do you know who she is? She's the girl from the Qin clan who seduced Prince Zhongshuan as soon as she entered the capital and was taken to the prince's estate for several days." Qin Yining really wanted to curse Madame Lu's entire family. If it was in the past, she would have already slapped her. However, this wasn't her home. If she acted like this outside, she would be criticized and would inevitably cause trouble for her father. Her family's foundation wasn't stable yet, so she could only endure and not act out. However, Lu Heng was even angrier than her. He said in a deep voice, "Your way of speaking, forget it. Apologize to Miss Qin first. I'll talk to your father and brother later." He actually gave an order that left no room for doubt, and even wanted to find Madame Lu's father and brother. Madame Lu's face turned purple. She glared at Qin Yining with shame and hatred. Her lips trembled, and after a while, she squeezed out a sentence, "I'm sorry." Qin Yining smiled faintly and said, "I don't dare." She then turned to Lu Heng and bowed before returning upstairs with her people. Watching Qin Yining's delicate figure slowly disappear around the corner of the stairs, Lu Heng finally withdrew his gaze that couldn't help but follow her. He couldn't help but be shocked at his own loss of self-control. He actually had a good impression of a woman at first sight. He didn't dare to look at her calmly, but still stared at her figure. "Lu Heng, oh Lu Heng, you're getting worse and worse." Lu Heng turned around and walked out. Seeing that Madame Lu didn't follow, he said in a deep voice, "Why aren't you leaving?" Madame Lu didn't dare to disobey. She could only fiercely stomp her feet and leave the restaurant with her maidservant. She originally thought that with Lu Heng in charge today, she would be able to fiercely dampen Qin Yining's arrogance. She didn't expect that she would be the one to suffer a loss. Qin Yining and Madame Liao sat on the third floor by the window and watched the Lu family's carriage gradually go away. Madame Liao said, "Alliance Master may not know, but that second Master Heng is a well-known figure. He was born in the Lu family's main branch and is the second son of the first wife. Don't look at how he's only 26 this year. In the business circle, he was already famous 10 years ago. He didn't rely on his family's influence, but rather, he anonymously started from scratch. It wasn't until his business became big that he told everyone that he was a descendant of the Lu family." Qin Yining nodded and said, "It seems that he's a person with brilliant methods. For a large family like the Lu family, it's natural for them to cultivate such a talented person. Isn't that so?" That Madame Lu wasn't like that at the beginning. Although she was born in a side branch, she was still a legitimate daughter. It's just that when Jin Shang led the peasant army in the early years, he cooperated with the Lu family. In order to strengthen the relationship, one of Jin Shang's subordinates married a daughter of the Lu family side branch. It was General Mi and this Miss Lu Tsuehuan. This Miss Lu's appearance is outstanding, and she's proud of her identity. Naturally, she wouldn't fancy an uncouth man with an ordinary appearance. After a long time, she began to raise men. Unfortunately, the marriage was set by Jin Shang and the Lu family's elders. That General Mi was quite fond of Miss Lu. After a while, General Mi died. Qin Yining listened to Madame Liao's explanation and nodded with a smile, saying, "It seems that our Qingtian Alliance's intelligence system is quite good." Madame Liao's face turned red when she heard this. She secretly thought that Alliance Master really held a grudge. She quickly smiled and said, "In the future, if Alliance Master knows anything, just let me know. Chapter 366. After being disturbed by Mrs. Liu, Qin Yining was no longer in the mood to play. He only spoke with Mrs. Liao for a while before they parted ways. Before they parted, Qin Yining hesitated for a moment. He still didn't say that he would entrust the Qin-Tian alliance to find his grandmother. She thought that perhaps his grandmother had given the Qin-Tian alliance to her in the past because she didn't want to be involved with these Jianghu people. What his grandmother cared more about was how the women of the Sun family were going to recuperate and live well. Although the Sun family didn't have any sons, the Sun family still had daughters who could marry into their family. As long as they settled down and developed, the Sun family would prosper again in a few years. Thinking of this, Qin Yining also felt relieved. After all, their lives would only get better and better. Percent at the same time, on Shiji Street, a spacious vermilion carriage was steadily driving towards the county king of Yan's palace. Yu Yin sat cross-legged in silence. He lowered his head and looked at the exquisite embroidery on his robe. This robe was newly awarded by Your Majesty 2 days ago. It was said that the best embroiderers were chosen to sew it for him. However, the complicated and gorgeous county king's robe didn't make him happy. The more dazzling the county king's robe was, the more it made him, the ruler of a fallen country, feel useless. He was once an emperor, but now he had to walk in the capital of the Zhou with the title of a county king of another country. He felt that the way people looked at him when he went out was strange. What's more, he just witnessed the scene of Qin Yining being humiliated in the restaurant hall. Since Dian was destroyed, Yu Yin felt that the inexplicable pressure on his shoulders could finally be removed. He also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. At the beginning, he only succeeded the throne to hand over the letter of surrender. Everything was settled. After coming to the Zhou, he often advised himself that people should be content with what they have. It wasn't a bad thing to live the rest of his life peacefully. However, under the courteous but disdainful gazes of the Zhou's courtiers, he felt an unprecedented humiliation. Only now did he realize that he had been too naive. The reason he was still able to live on was to prove the benevolence of Your Majesty in the Zhou, to flaunt Your Majesty's contributions to the vicissitudes of the world. All his life, he had been a foil for the entertainment of others. Your Majesty de Zhou would think of how wise he was when the Dian dynasty was destroyed. What position did he have to pursue Qin Yining, a person who looked good on the outside, but was actually lowly? Even if Qin Yining had been abducted, her father was still a second-stage Yuan cultivator who was about to enter the pavilion. What about him? With his current status, it was impossible for him to bring Qin Yining happiness and peace. In fact, when she was being bullied, he didn't even have the courage to speak up for her. Instead, under Li Yinyan's tug, he followed her lead and left. This was because he knew that he didn't have the right to speak up. Even if he did, no one would listen to him. Furthermore, with his current awkward status, he couldn't afford to offend the Liu clan. Yu Yin couldn't help but clench his fists. He was filled with disgust and disgust for himself. Was there anyone else in the world who was as useless and spineless as him? He didn't even dare to protect the woman he loved. How could he have the face to ask Qin Yining to be his concubine? How could he have the face to tell her, "Follow me and I'll protect you"? He couldn't even keep his promise to her now, let alone in the future. Wang Yi. Li Yinyan saw that Yu Qian's expression was extremely ugly. Even the veins on his forehead were popping out. She held Yu Qian's hand and gently shook it. Wang Yi, don't make yourself suffer. We still have a long way to go. Now that things have settled down, everything will be fine. Li Yinyan's eyes reddened as she spoke, but her voice was extremely gentle. I know that you like the Qin clan. Don't worry. I will continue to work hard to make peace with them. Wang Yi is talented and elegant. What woman wouldn't adore you? I think the Qin clan can't bring themselves to accept it. They must feel that they've been through something like that before, so they're too embarrassed to accept it. If I go a few more times, she might agree. You don't have to go. Yu Yin was like a puppet with slow reactions. He slowly turned to look at Li Yinyan and shook his head. You don't have to go. I am not good enough for her. Li Yinyan was stunned when she heard this. She couldn't help but burst into tears. She hugged Yu Qiyin and sobbed. Wang Yi, Wang Yi, why do you have to be like this? How are you not good enough for her? In my heart, Wang Yi is an indomitable man. He's talented and gentle like an immortal. Anyone who doesn't like you is blind. You're so sad for the Qin clan. If you ask me, what should I do? Li Yinyin buried her face in Yu Qiyan's shoulder and started sobbing. Yu Qiyin was upset by Li Yinyin's tears. He felt his nose sting and his eyes heat up. He almost cried as well. After a while, Yu Qiyin hugged Li Yinyin's shoulder and patted her. Don't cry. Let's live happily in the future. Li Yinyin slowly raised her teary eyes to look at Yu Qiyin. She choked with sobs as she said, All right, Your Highness. As long as Your Highness doesn't mind, this concubine will always be by your side. We will live a good life, and in the future, this concubine will give birth to a few more children for you. Our family will live a happy life. Yu Qiyin looked at Li Yinyin's eyes, which were especially bright after being washed by her tears. His heart suddenly melted into a puddle of water. Although he couldn't obtain Qin Yining, Li Yinyin had been with him since the beginning. She had gone through thick and thin with him, never leaving him. People's hearts were made of flesh. Li Yinyin treated him so wholeheartedly. How could he not be moved? Okay. Yu Qiyin hugged Li Yinyin's shoulder and held her in his arms. He rested his chin on her forehead and said, Let's live happily together. This king will also work hard to earn power and status. We won't always be like this. Li Yinyin's heart suddenly jumped when she heard this. She hurriedly said, Wang Yi, I don't care about power or status. As long as I can be with Wang Yi, I don't care about fame or power at all. Yu Qiyin smiled and said, You don't care, but this king cares. Li Yinyin's words turned to her mouth a few times, but she didn't dare to say them out loud. She really wanted to ask Yu Qiyin, was he suddenly so eager to obtain power so that their family could live happily together? Or was it because of Qin Yining? But Li Yinyin wasn't a stupid person. Although she was jealous, she didn't want to show her jealous side in front of Yu Qiyin. It would be annoying for no reason. But in her heart, she hated Qin Yining to the extreme. She could tolerate Yu Qiyin taking in 100 ordinary concubines, but she didn't want Yu Qiyin to marry only one that he truly loved. Why did she always stay by Yu Qiyan's side like this? Wasn't it because she wanted to live a peaceful life? If Qin Yining married into the family, she probably wouldn't have a peaceful life. At that time, don't blame her for being ruthless. Percent in contrast to Yu Qiyan's low spirits, Li Qiqian was currently in a very good mood and sipping tea in the Empress Dowager's palace. Li Helan sat obediently to the side and poured tea for Li Qiqian at the right time. She also chatted with him very humorously. Imperial Brother's plan this time is so ingenious. By borrowing the strength of others, the family Qin will soon realize that the only person they can rely on in the capital is Imperial Brother. The Empress Dowager also smiled and said, Your Majesty's method is very good. Watching the fire from the other side of the river will avoid provoking the fire. The Empress Dowager was a person who had a sense of propriety in her words. Even if she had any ideas in her heart, she would never discuss them in front of the emperor. This was because she knew that the emperor was a person who didn't like the imperial harem interfering in politics. As a birth mother, she only needed to live a comfortable life. If she said too much, it would implicate her family. However, although Your Majesty didn't like the imperial harem interfering in politics, there were times when he needed the imperial harem's help. For example, Li Helan this time. Heaven's might is unpredictable. Whether or not the imperial harem participates in politics, it all depends on Your Majesty's intentions. He wanted Li Helan to help, so Li Helan had to do her best. Li Qiqian smiled and said, Imperial Mother's words are reasonable. Zhen just doesn't want the imperial court to be controlled by one party. As a woman, Li Qiqian had never been willing to explain the affairs of the imperial court in detail. Li Helan could see Li Qiqian's impatience, so she gave the Empress Dowager a look and asked, Imperial Brother, will Lan still be in contact with Lu family? Lan actually doesn't like the way this person usually acts. If I get close to her, there's no need for outsiders to think that Lan is that kind of person. Li Qiqian laughed when he heard this. Are you afraid that outsiders will misunderstand? Or are you afraid that Prince Consort will misunderstand? Imperial brother. Li Helan's face flushed red, and she stamped her feet shyly. This caused the Empress Dowager and Li Qiqian to laugh again. Imperial mother. Aken and Lan still have things to talk about, so we'll take our leave first. Li Qiqian laughed enough, stood up, and cupped his hands to bid farewell. The Empress Dowager didn't stay any longer and only ordered her mother to send the two off. Anyway, they were all her children. It didn't matter if they relied on and used each other, as long as they supported each other and didn't fall out with each other. Li Helan followed Li Qiqian all the way to the imperial study. After the chief eunuch Li Guanwen served tea, he left under Li Qiqian's signal. Li Helan then asked coquettishly, Imperial brother, why are you looking for Lan? Li Qiqian smiled and said, How does Prince Consort treat you? Li Helan thought of Jiziu's handsome face and recalled that day at the Liu family, when Jiziu turned and left. Her face turned from red to white, and then from white to red. She already regretted it. She shouldn't have listened to the Liu family that day and let the two men she loved see her hooking up with someone else. Prince Consort treats Lan very well. Li Helan answered shyly, and then secretly looked at Li Qiqian and said softly, Imperial brother, Lan has a presumptuous request. I hope Imperial brother can help Lan. Oh, what is it? Don't hesitate to tell me. Li Qiqian raised his eyebrows. Li Helan said, Imperial brother, Lan doesn't want to live in the princess residence. How about you allow Lan to live in the prince consort's residence? After we get married, we'll live in separate residences, so we won't be able to see each other. We won't be as happy as ordinary couples. Chapter 367. When Li Helan heard this, she immediately became alert, but she didn't dare to show it on her face. She obediently blinked her large eyes and said coquettishly, Lan and the prince consort are husband and wife. Isn't it the same no matter who asks? Moreover, the prince consort is a sawmouth gourd. Imperial brother, don't you know that? Li Qiqian smiled and said, Forget it. Do you think we don't know your temper? You act as you please. If you move into the prince consort's residence, who knows if someone will impeach Lan the moment you move in. Moreover, you're a princess. How can people talk about you behind your back for not following the rules? Imperial brother. Li Helan pulled Li Qiqian's hand and shook it coquettishly. Imperial brother dotes on Lan. Moreover, what outsiders say is more important than whether Lan is happy or not. Li Qiqian frowned slightly and pulled Li Helan's hand away. He said in a low voice, Lan, be obedient. Do you want people to talk about us behind our backs as peasants and military emperors ascending the throne? Li Helan's heart trembled. Even if she didn't give up, she didn't dare to say another word. Ever since Li Qiqian led the rebel army to attack Beiji, these kinds of rumors had never stopped. Even though the Zhou had been established for 4 years, and the old officials of Beiji had pledged their allegiance on the surface, there were still many people talking about them behind their backs. Li Qiqian cared about his reputation the most. Therefore, he was very strict about the matters in the palace. He was afraid that people would gossip about them over tea. An indescribable sadness welled up in her heart. Her imperial brother, who used to dote on her the most, no longer put her preferences first. There were too many things in her imperial brother's heart. Reputation, status, power, all of them were more important than her. She, as his younger sister, was nothing. This was the thoughts of an emperor. This was the sadness of being a princess. When Li Qiqian saw Li Helan's pitiful appearance with her head lowered, Li Qiqian couldn't help but feel a little bad. In the end, she was his most beloved younger sister. There were some things that he had no choice but to use her. However, when he could satisfy her, Li Qiqian was willing to compensate her. Forget it. Although it's unrealistic for you to move into the prince consort's residence, we will help you talk to Lan. Are you satisfied now? Li Helan heard this, at first, but then her eyes. As long as Li Qiqian was willing to compromise for her, it meant that she hadn't completely lost her imperial brother's favor. Imperial brother's Lan's brother. Emperor's words is Emperor's histess, Sisyphus Emperor speak. Imperial brother's words are the imperial edict. If prince consort doesn't listen, imperial brother can deal with him. Li Qitian was amused by Li Helan's appearance. He tapped her forehead and said, "You like Prince Consort Ji that much? Didn't you like Pang Zhishi before? How could that be?" Li Helan blushed and shyly lowered her head. She definitely didn't dare to say that she also liked Pang Zhishi very much. Seeing Li Helan like this, Li Qitian was even more certain of Li Helan's feelings for Ji Ziyu. It was no wonder that she was moved. Ji Ziyu's appearance, talent, and power were all comparable to Pang Zhao's. Didn't girls of Li Helan's age like handsome men like Ji Ziyu the most? Since they were already officially husband and wife, it was no wonder that she was so attached to him. However, this wasn't a scene that Li Qitian wanted to see. Li Qitian sighed. When he faced Li Helan, he still felt guilty, but any emotions would not delay his business. "Your Majesty, Prince Zhongshuan, requests an audience," Li Guanwen announced from outside the hall. Li Helan was stunned at first. Then she felt that this unexpected joy had hit her on the head. Since that day, she hadn't had a chance to see Pang Zhao again. Wasn't it fate that they suddenly met here today? Li Qitian carefully observed Li Helan's expression. Seeing her like this, he had a plan in mind. It seemed that his plan to arrange for Pang Zhao to meet Li Helan today was correct. Otherwise, if Li Helan's thoughts were diverted to Ji Ziyu, wouldn't his previous arrangements be in vain? "Pass." Li Qitian's low voice echoed in the imperial study, pulling back Li Helan's thoughts that were obviously wandering due to her surprise. As soon as he finished speaking, the hall's door was pushed open by the chamberlain. Pang Zhao was dressed in a dark purple robe with arrow sleeves and a purple gold crown on his head. He walked in quickly and bowed. "This humble subject pays his respects to your majesty." He was born tall and thin, and the purple robe with arrow sleeves today set off his noble and natural aura, especially the pair of phoenix eyes under the slanted sword-like eyebrows. Just one look at Li Helan was enough to make her fall head over heels for him. Li Helan couldn't help but think in her heart, it's true that one day, without seeing Pang Zhao feels like 3 years. Now that I've seen him, even my bad mood has improved. "Lan." Li Helan heard Li Qitian's voice and suddenly came back to her senses. She looked up and met Li Qitian's impatient eyes. Only then did she realize that she had been distracted. Li Qitian said again, "What are you thinking about? Did you catch a cold and feel unwell?" "Imperial brother, it's nothing. Lan is fine." Li Helan looked at Pang Zhao with a smile. "Brother Zhao's robe with arrow sleeves today is not bad." Pang Zhao hurriedly cupped his hands. "This subject doesn't dare." Li Helan quickly glanced at Li Qitian and then said, "We grew up together. Didn't we all call each other that? Imperial brother won't mind. Isn't that right, Imperial brother?" Li Helan looked at Li Qitian coquettishly, which made Li Qitian unhappy again. He wasn't in the mood to investigate why Li Helan was so frivolous. Anyway, he had achieved his goal, so he didn't want to pursue it any further. Li Qitian smiled very gently and reprimanded in a not-so-strict tone. "Nonsense. How can the present be compared to the past? You should call Pang Zhishi Wang Yi. What's more, you're already married now. Jilan and Pang Zhishi are close friends. If you call Pang Zhishi the way you did in the past, what will Jilan think?" Li Helan's face flushed red. For a moment, she was speechless. She couldn't help but steal glances at Pang Zhao's reaction. She was afraid of seeing Pang Zhao's annoyance, but she was also afraid that Pang Zhao would be indifferent. Naturally, she saw the latter. Pang Zhao stood with his hands by his side, looking respectful and obedient. He was unmoved by Li Helan's words and didn't take her seriously at all. Li Helan's joy of seeing Pang Zhao was completely washed away by his cold and indifferent attitude. Li Qitian saw the two like this and knew what to do. He said, "Lan go down. We have something to discuss with Prince Zhongshuan." "Yes." Li Helan acknowledged and left. Before she left, she looked reluctantly at Pang Zhao's tall and handsome back. Li Qitian watched the door of the imperial study close and then said with a smile, "Don't mind her. That little girl has been spoiled by the Empress Dowager, but her heart isn't bad. Chapter 368. Although he said this, Pang Zhao's heart was as clear as a mirror. Li Helan was indeed interested in her, but Li Helan was just a little girl. If she didn't have anyone backing her up, how could she have the courage to be so direct? Pang Zhao knew that Li Qitian was trying to sow discord between him and Jiziyu. This was because Li Qitian was afraid that he would team up with Jiziyu to deal with him. In fact, if he was in Li Qitian's position, he would also be worried about the two generals who had a large number of troops working together. However, he wouldn't do it as unsightly as Li Qitian. People could use schemes, but they couldn't throw away their moral bottom line. However, Pang Zhao also knew that Li Qitian could only use this method to plot against him. He couldn't openly fall out with him. His sister, Yi, had helped him think of a way to avoid danger and successfully enter the cabinet. Currently, he was Li Qitian's only trusted aide in the cabinet. If Li Qitian wanted to make a decision, he still needed his vote in the cabinet. How could he be so ruthless? Thinking like this, Pang Zhao immediately felt that his darling was simply his lucky star. As long as he thought of her, his heart would be filled with joy. While Pang Zhao was talking to Li Qitian in the Imperial Study, Li Helan was standing in the courtyard outside the Imperial Study, expressionlessly looking at the closed door. Li Guanwen stood under the eaves of the corridor with his eunuchs. His eyes were focused on his nose, and his nose was focused on his heart. It was as if he couldn't see Li Helan. However, how could anyone not see Li Helan's resentful appearance? Li Guanwen had been by Li Qitian's side, so he had seen and known much more than others. It was just that he had kept everything to himself. Now that he saw Li Helan so sad, Li Guanwen couldn't help but sigh for the Princess Royal. Since I've entered your Majesty's game, I can only be a qualified chess piece to survive. Otherwise, I won't have a good ending. He was just a small eunuch from the previous dynasty. How did he become the eunuch of the ceremony directorate? It was because he understood that the most important thing in following the emperor was loyalty and obedience. Princess Royal of Anyang looked like she was going to go against the emperor's will at any time. She was really dangerous. Just as everyone was lost in thought, the sound of Pang Zhao bowing and retreating came from the hall. Li Guanwen hurriedly went to open the door with the servant. There was also a young chamberlain who presented Pang Zhao's large brocade overcoat with a gray mouse fur collar. Pang Zhao took the cloak and casually draped it over his shoulders. After greeting Li Guanwen, he walked down the stairs without looking back and left. When he passed by Li Helan, he didn't even look at her. Li Helan's eyes were glued to Pang Zhao's body the entire time, foolishly looking at his figure. It wasn't until his tall and handsome figure left the courtyard and left her line of sight that Li Helan came back to her senses. Pang Zhao had left like this. He didn't even look at her. Li Helan was filled with anger. She lifted her skirt and chased after him. But Pang Zhao was tall and had long legs. Because he noticed that Li Helan was following behind him, he sped up his steps. Li Helan chased after him with the palace Maid He Xiang. It wasn't easy to close the distance, but Pang Zhao's steps became even faster. Li Helan finally reacted. Pang Zhao was deliberately walking this fast, deliberately avoiding her. "Big brother Zhao," Li Helan softly called out. She didn't believe that Pang Zhao would ignore her. But Pang Zhao acted like he didn't hear her and didn't even turn around. Li Helan's heart was filled with grievances like a flood, almost drowning her. Why? Why did he treat her like this? Jiziyu was cold to her. Her royal brother didn't care about her happiness, and her mother told her to listen to her royal brother. It was like she wasn't a person, but someone else's accessory, a tool. Now, even Pang Zhao was treating her like this. "Big brother Zhao." Li Helan raised her voice in anger and grievance. Her roar shook the ice and snow on the eaves that were about to melt. The eunuchs and palace maids in the corridor were also shocked. When they turned around and saw that it was Li Helan, they hurriedly lowered their heads and quickly retreated, not willing to look closely. But Pang Zhao continued to stride forward, refusing to pay attention to her. Li Helan lifted her skirt and shouted as she ran, "Big brother Zhao." "Pang Zhao, stop right there." She ran until she was out of breath. The hairpins on her temples were late, but her voice was getting louder and louder. Pang Zhao's brows were almost twisted into a knot. Li Helan was actually so unbridled and unrestrained in the imperial palace. She was shameless, but he still had to take into account his relationship with Ji Ziyu. Pang Zhao suddenly stopped and turned around, coldly looking at Li Helan. Li Helan ran until she was out of breath. Her hair was tangled with the golden bead tassels on her temples, and her face was covered in sweat, looking very sorry. But her eyes were filled with grievance and anger, making them even brighter than normal. Big Brother Xiao, why are you ignoring Lan? Pang Zhao resisted the urge to roll his eyes at her, and respectfully said with a lowered head, reporting to the princess, "This minister was thinking about your majesty's orders and was lost in thought, so I didn't hear the eldest princess' voice." This reason, even Li Helan couldn't reprimand him. Good. Very good. Li Helan gritted her teeth, and after a long time, she said, "Then this princess orders you to bring me to a restaurant to sit down and drink a cup of wine with me. Do you hear me?" Pang Zhao said with a faint smile, "This minister hears you, but the eldest princess must be joking. If the eldest princess wants to drink, naturally it's best to find the prince consort. What kind of person is this minister? The eldest princess shouldn't joke with this minister. What kind of person are you? What kind of person are you to me?" Pang Zhao moved back a few steps like he was avoiding the plague. "Eldest princess, please don't joke. This minister has nothing to do with the eldest princess. If you speak like this, you really don't follow the rules. If others saw this, wouldn't they misunderstand? Even if the eldest princess doesn't care about your reputation, this minister still has to consider my reputation. You, what did this princess do to you? Why are you avoiding me like I'm a scourge? Eldest princess, please don't pester me endlessly. Your Majesty has given this minister an important task, so this minister will leave." Pang Zhao cupped his hands without any mercy and turned to leave. Li Helan wanted to continue chasing, but Yi Xiang hurriedly stopped her. "Eldest princess, don't be impulsive. This is the palace road. There are many people coming and going. If it was passed to the ears of the prince consort, wouldn't it cause a misunderstanding? Eldest princess, you have to reconsider." Li Helan's tears fell like rain as she sobbed while wiping her tears. "What do I care about? One after another, they don't care about me anymore. Even if I died now, no one would shed a single tear." "You mustn't say this. You are a princess, a golden branch and jade leaf. You are the pearl of the Empress Dowager and your Majesty. How can anyone not care about you? Scram, this one doesn't need you to care about me." Li Helan threw off Yi Xiang's hand and walked forward while crying. Yi Xiang looked at Li Helan's back with a frown and shook her head with a sigh. There were some things that even a servant like her could see clearly, so why couldn't the eldest princess understand? Now that such a ruckus had been stirred up, wouldn't it be known to everyone? "I'm afraid your Majesty also wants this, right?" As soon as she thought this, Yi Xiang quickly shook her head and chased out all the thoughts she shouldn't have. She was just a servant. How could she have the life to ask about her master's matters? It was better for her to keep her little life. However, how could there be an impenetrable wall in this world? Chapter 369. The rumors in the city hadn't reached Qin Yining's ears yet. At this time, she was accompanying the Sun clan to the jewelry store to choose a head ornament. "Mother, at my age, I don't need such expensive head ornaments. If I wear them, I won't look good." Qin Yining pushed a brocade box covered with red velvet to the Sun clan. In the box, there were 64 pieces of exquisite gold thread jewelry inlaid with rubies. From the large pieces to the small pieces of earrings and rings, each piece was exquisite and detailed. They shone dazzlingly under the sunlight and were very luxurious. "I think it's just right for Mother to use it." Qin Yining took a ruby hairpin with a golden bead tassel and compared it with the Sun clan's hairband. She said with a smile, "It's really good. Mother's children are fair and clean. This ruby suits Mother's skin color. Moreover, Mother's status can also support such gorgeous jewelry. Why would I need to wear these? The Sun Clan's lips curled up at her daughter's praise. She put the tassel hairpin back into the box. I want to take advantage of this moment to choose a set of good head ornaments for your dowry in the future. On the way here, we threw away almost all of our valuables. We didn't prepare any decent head ornaments for you earlier. Your father said that he plans to hold your coming-of-age ceremony this year. After that, he will discuss marriage. It's not a bad idea to choose a head ornament for your dowry in advance. Qin Yining blushed at the Sun Clan's words. Inexplicably, the image of Pang Xiao wearing a red python robe appeared in her mind. However, when she heard the Sun Clan say, discuss marriage, she felt a little nervous. As a woman, she naturally had to listen to her parents and matchmakers for important matters such as marriage. However, her relationship with Pang Xiao was already so close, but she might not be able to obtain the approval of old Madame and her mother. After all, they didn't know any inside information. If she couldn't marry Pang Xiao in the end, she would regret it for the rest of her life. However, after thinking about it, Qin Yining put down her worries. Because her relationship with Pang Xiao was approved by Qin Huaiyuan, whether it was the old Madame or the Sun Clan, they had to ask Qin Huaiyuan in the end if they wanted to discuss her marriage. At this moment, Qin Yining was really glad that his father was open-minded. In the end, the Sun Clan still had the heart of a loving mother. They used their own money to buy the noodle. The price of this set of head ornaments was enough for an ordinary wealthy family to marry a daughter. When you go back, hide this first. Don't let old Madame and the other sisters see it. Right now, the family is living a tight life. If they know that I use so much money, even if it's my personal belongings, they will talk about it. Mother, I understand. Qin Yining couldn't help but smile. The Sun Clan member pinched Qin Yining's cheek and said, don't laugh at me. I'm just worried that something might happen. When you have your coming-of-age ceremony, we'll choose one from here to use. When you get married, this set of head ornaments will be just right. It's festive and noble. Qin Yining was amused by the rarely seen happy appearance of the Sun Clan. Mother, you're planning too early. My matters haven't even been set in stone yet. Do you still need to worry about this? My daughter was born with such beauty, and your father is supporting you. Are you still afraid that you won't be able to find a good marriage? It's always been a family with hundreds of suitors. We're just newcomers, and because of our past, we can't publicize it. Silly girl, do you believe that if we release the news that you want to discuss marriage, our family's doorstep will be flattened by people? You're exaggerating. Qin Yining laughed again. The mother and daughter chatted and laughed, causing Mother Jean, Ji Yun, and Xian Yin to laugh as well. After the group bought the jewelry, they went to the tea house to find a private room to sit down and rest. The Sun Clan ordered a pot of Zhengshan Xiaozhong and a few snacks, and chatted with Qin Yining while drinking tea. Qin Yining realized that ever since the Sun Clan found out that Qiao Yuqing was no longer Qin Huaiyuan's concubine, the Sun Clan's entire face glowed with radiance. It was as if they had suddenly become 10 years younger, and they were much more amiable and calm when dealing with people. The Sun Clan liked this daughter more and more now, not only because she looked like the young Qin Huaiyuan, but also because of her intelligence and calmness. Although she was a mother, she could always find a sense of security from her daughter. It was as if she could think of a way to solve anything. The relationship between the mother and daughter had become much closer in recent days. Just as the atmosphere was harmonious, Qin Yining vaguely heard someone talking loudly in the hall downstairs. They seemed to have mentioned Prince Zhongshan. The Sun Clan was also very curious, so she raised her eyes to look at Qin Yining. Qin Yining signaled to Ji Yun. Ji Yun immediately went to open the lattice window facing the hall on the first floor. The noise in the hall entered her ears, and she could also clearly hear the man's voice just now. So a good man like Prince Zhongshan, how many women's hearts will he steal? Even a woman like the eldest princess can't forget him. I really don't know which woman in this world can refuse such an outstanding man. Such a joke caused everyone in the hall to laugh, and the laughter seemed to be particularly meaningful. Qin Yining raised her eyebrows. She didn't know what happened between Pang Zhishi and Li Helan. Although she was curious, she didn't doubt Pang Xiao. They had been through so many ups and downs, so how could she not know Pang Zhao's sincerity toward her? However, when Bing Tang, Ji Yun, and Xian Yun heard this, they became nervous, especially the Sun clan. When they heard someone mention Pang Xiao, their faces immediately darkened. They carefully glanced at Qin Yining, afraid that their daughter would be upset, so they stood up and said, "Sister Yi, we're tired from shopping today. Let's go back." "Okay." Qin Yining smiled and agreed. Then, she accompanied the Sun clan in the car and left. Before getting into the car, Qin Yining looked at Jing Zhe, who was following beside her. Jing Zhe immediately came forward. Qin Yining whispered a few words in Jing Zhe's ear. Jing Zhe immediately obeyed and left. Qin Yining returned home and tidied up the jewelry she had just bought. Bing Tang observed Qin Yining's expression. When he saw that she wasn't angry, he said in a low voice, "Miss, don't think too much. Wang Yi isn't that kind of person." "That's right." Bing Tang spoke up. Ji Yun and Xian Yun also tried to persuade her. Only Qiu Lu, who didn't go out with them today, was confused. She didn't know what had happened. At this time, Jing Zhe returned. "Miss, this subordinate has asked around outside. There are many kinds of rumors, but to summarize, it's that Anyang princess royal chased after Prince Zhongshan. It seems like she wanted to express her goodwill, but after being rejected by Wang Yi, she cried and made a scene." As he spoke, he took out an envelope and presented it to her with both hands. "When I returned home, I met Master Zhong's servant who came to deliver a letter to you. This subordinate brought the letter in." Qin Yining took the letter. When she saw that there was no head written on it, she curiously took out the letter. The content of the letter was very simple. There were only 4 words written in bold calligraphy that penetrated the back of the paper. "There's no such thing." Pang Xiao was afraid that she would think too much, so he specially sent her a note. Chapter 370. In fact, even if Pang Xiao didn't explain, Qin Yining wouldn't have suspected him, since she knew what Li Qitian was thinking. How could she not see that there was something fishy about this matter? She was just curious. What was Li Helan thinking this time to do such a thing? Did she really not care about Prince Consort Ji's feelings anymore? Or was Li Helan tired of her current marriage? Qin Yining found it hard to imagine that there was such a woman in the world. She had just gotten married, but she was already looking for a boy toy behind her husband's back. She was hooking up with one and hanging on to another. Did she not feel tired at all? "Miss." Bing Tang became more and more worried when he saw Qin Yining fall into deep thought after laughing and holding the note. Qin Yining came back to her senses and smiled. "It's nothing." She turned to Jing Zhe and said, "I'll have to trouble you this time." Jing Zhe hurriedly cupped his hands and bowed. "This is subordinate's duty. If you don't have any other orders, subordinate will take his leave." After Jing Zhe left, Bing Tang asked, "Was it Wang Yi who wrote the letter to you?" "Yes." He even wrote a note to explain the rumors out there. Qin Yining put the letter back into the envelope. She wanted to burn it, but then she thought that since her father had already tacitly approved of her relationship with Pang Xiao, it would be a pity if she didn't keep such an interesting letter as a memento. Thinking of this, Qin Yining handed the letter to Bing Tang. "Keep it for me. Put it together with the jewelry just now." Bing Tang couldn't help but laugh. "Miss, aren't you afraid that people will find out that you and Wang Yi are having a private affair?" Qin Yining raised her eyebrows innocently. "There are even worse rumors out there. Maybe someone will write a book about how I was kidnapped to the Prince Zhongshuan's residence. Why would I care about a private affair?" "Miss, you're just going all out." "Wrong. This is called being free and easy." The maidservants chatted and laughed, causing Qin Yining to also laugh along. Seeing that Qin Yining did not hold any grudges, Ji Yun and Xian Yun secretly heaved a sigh of relief. When they thought of Li Helan, they became even more annoyed. She was the eldest princess of a noble family, and she was already married. Moreover, her husband was such an outstanding person. However, the eldest princess still didn't know how to be satisfied. Not only did she flirt around all day, she even coveted Wang Yi. Wasn't this deliberately making things difficult for him? Ji Yun and Xian Yun were both nurtured by Pang Zhao's side. Naturally, they hoped that Pang Xiao and Qin Yining could be sweet together. The appearance of someone like Li Helan made the two of them very angry. Qi Yin even fantasized that it would be great if he could teach Li Helan a lesson. Percent at this time, in front of the prince consort's residence, Li Helan was wearing a magenta-colored large sleeve jacket with embroidered floral patterns. She was wearing a yellow dress and a red cloak with a white fur collar. She was currently glaring at the doorman, blocking her path. Open your eyes wider and look at who this princess is. This princess is the eldest princess. You even dare to block this princess's path. Do you not want to live anymore? Eldest princess, please calm your anger. The doorman was a tall man. He stood straight, and his short robes made him look more like a soldier than a doorman. His words were also very straightforward. The Marquis has ordered that no one is allowed to visit. Eldest princess, how about you go back first? When a Marquis is free, he will naturally come find you. Li Helan's eyes were red from anger. What kind of words were these? What kind of words were these? This princess is the eldest princess, yet she has been rejected outside her husband's door. She has to go back and wait for him to be free. Has your head been clamped by the door? Has there been such a rule since ancient times? Li Helan reached out to push the door open. The doorman took a step back and stood in front of the door. He lowered his head and said, Eldest princess, please don't blame me. This little one is the Marquis' servant, so naturally I will listen to the Marquis' orders. If the Marquis says he won't see anyone, then he won't see anyone. Eldest princess, please go back. Li Helan finally heard it clearly. This person called Jiziyu Marquis and not Prince Consort. So this person really was Jiziyu's trusted aide. Perhaps he was even brought back from the military. Jiziyu actually had a soldier stand in front of the door. Could it be that he wanted to block her? Tears welled up in Li Helan's eyes, and she immediately began to cry. The doorman lowered his head and did not look at Li Helan. It was like he did not see her cry at all as he stood there motionless like a piece of wood. At this time, the door to the Prince Consort Palace was pushed open. Jiziyu was wearing a white robe with a gray fur coat on his shoulder. His lips were slightly curled as he turned around to say something with a faint smile. Behind Jiziyu was the incomparably handsome Pang Xiao, wearing a purple robe with a jade crown on his head. Perhaps he never thought that Li Helan would be blocked in front of the Prince Consort Palace, but Pang Xiao's footsteps paused before he came forward to give a bow. Greetings to the eldest princess. The faint smile on Jiziyu's face had already disappeared. When he looked at Li Helan, his eyes were calm, and there was no expression on his exquisite face. He also gave a bow with Pang Xiao. Greetings to the eldest princess. Because of all the rumors outside, Li Helan was worried that Jiziyu would think too much, so she quickly came to explain. Who would have thought that Pang Xiao would move faster than her? Moreover, the Prince Consort Palace did not allow her to enter, but Pang Xiao had swaggered out. Even if Li Helan knew that Pang Xiao and Jiziyu had a life and death relationship, she couldn't help feeling angry. She was the eldest princess. Could it be that her status was lower than a prince with a different surname? What does the Prince Consort mean by this? Li Helan asked in a deep voice. Jiziyu stood up and said in a voice that was neither servile nor overbearing, What is the eldest princess asking? The doorman said that the Prince Consort Palace does not allow anyone to visit. Why is it that this one, the person closest to you, is not allowed to enter, but the Prince Consort Palace allows Prince Zhongshuan to enter? Or could it be that the Prince Consort only ordered people to stop this one and allow anyone else to enter? Are you only targeting this one? Jiziyu heard this and looked at Li Helan without any expression. His voice was calm as he said, Why does the eldest princess think this? Could it be that the eldest princess thinks that I have a reason to target the eldest princess and not allow you to enter? Li Helan's throat choked. She had forgotten her reason for being angry, but now she remembered it. She looked at Pang Xiao standing behind Jiziyu and looking at her with disdain. Li Helan felt her ears burn, and she couldn't help but look away. Jiziyu frowned and said, Could it be that the rumors outside are true? Li Helan quickly said, No, this one. Jiziyu turned to look at Pang Xiao. Ji. Pang Xiao frowned. Alan, you should know my character. Jiziyu looked at him with a dark face. I know what kind of person you are, but similar things happen again and again. How can I trust you? Alon. Pang Xiao frowned, and his phoenix eyes flashed. You and I have been brothers for so many years. Am I the kind of person who would steal my brother's wife? If you're not, then why are there such rumors outside? Could it be that it's the eldest princess' fault? Jiziu suddenly pulled out the soft sword at his waist. With a shake of his hand, the sword suddenly became straight. Pang Jishi, you can't play with your friend's wife. Do you understand? You know what kind of person I am? How could I do such a thing? If you didn't take the initiative, could it be that the eldest princess seduced you? If you're a man, you have to admit your mistakes. What's the point of hiding? Jiziu was extremely angry as he swung his sword to stab. Pang Xiao was startled by his sudden movement and quickly dodged to the side. The two of them actually began to fight in front of the prince consort's residence. Li Helan was simply stunned seeing this. How could she have thought that Jiziu would actually fight for her? Normally, Jiziu didn't care about her. That kind of cold attitude made Li Helan lose confidence. Seeing Jiziu this angry, he clearly still cared about her. Otherwise, with the brotherly feelings between Jiziu and Pang Xiao, why would they fight? Li Helan's heart was filled with sweetness and satisfaction. There was also a little bit of pride as she felt her vanity being satisfied like never before. But thinking about Li Qitian's orders, Li Helan suddenly felt a chill run down her back. Seeing the two of them fighting, Li Helan had to admit that her royal brother's plan had worked. At this time, Jiziu's sword pierced Pang Xiao's arm, and blood began to pour out. Jilan, you bastard, you're still being serious. Are you still brothers? Playing with my wife? What kind of brother are you? Bullshit. Pang Xiao was filled with anger when he heard this. He also fiercely kicked Jiziu's shoulder. Jiziu was kicked back 2 steps. He angrily threw down his sword and began to fight with Pang Xiao with his bare hands. The two of them had high martial arts skills, but the two of them were fighting without any rules. They were like 2 children fighting over candy. The doorman and Huzi both came forward to stop the fight. The servants of the prince consort's residence heard the commotion and quickly came forward to stop them. This kind of chaotic scene attracted the passers-by to watch the show. The prince consort's residence was surrounded by high-ranking officials and nobles, so most of the passers-by were the servants of the neighbors. Seeing the eldest princess on the side, trying to stop the fight, Prince Consort Ji and Prince Zhongshuan were fighting with their bare hands. They were kicking and swinging their fists, causing everyone to be stunned. Not only were they thinking that the rumors outside might be true, Li Helan anxiously circled around the two of them and kept shouting, "Stop! This one orders you to stop." But the two of them ignored her. Only when the two of them had wounds on their faces, and one of them had blood flowing from the corner of his mouth, and one of them had a red patch on his forehead, did they stop. They were pulled back by their servants as they angrily stared at each other while panting. Pang Xiao wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and turned to leave. Jiziu rubbed his red forehead and pursed his lips as he watched Pang Xiao leave with his people. Finally, he turned to return to his residence. "Prince Consort." Li Helan came forward to hold Jiziu's arm. "You're injured. This one will help you apply medicine." Li Helan's tone was unprecedentedly shy. Jiziu helped her up and coldly said, "If the eldest princess wants to serve me, you can tell the mama and send this official over. The prince consort's residence is not a place you should come to. Please go back." Chapter 371. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Sheen Ening heard the news that Pang Xiao and Jiziu were fighting in front of the prince consort's manor on the same day and was stunned. They weren't children, so how could they fight like this? 2 war gods fighting because of a woman, and it wasn't a competition of martial arts, but a fight of fists and kicks. Just thinking about it, Sheen Ening couldn't bear to look at it. Weren't these two afraid that the Tiger Army and Dragon Stallion Army soldiers would find it hard to accept? However, Sheen Ening didn't need to think too much and could guess what was going on. Regardless of whether Pang Xiao and Jiziu agreed to put on a show, or if he purposely provoked Jiziu to fight, this scene was definitely what your majesty wanted to see. Anyone with a discerning eye knew what Li Qiqian was planning. He was slowly encroaching on the two nobles who held military power. He spared no effort in weakening Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu's suspicions. For example, Ji Ziyu, who was more obedient, he thought of ways to rope them in. For example, for Pang Xiao, who had high prestige but was still stubborn, he continuously weakened them. In short, the current situation in the imperial court should be very much to Li Qitian's liking. As expected, when Li Qitian heard the eunuch report that the two were fighting in front of the prince consort's manor, his eyebrows raised high. His finger, which had a jade ring on it, tapped on the armrest of the dragon throne happily. However, his face had an expression of disbelief as he frowned and said, "Are you sure you didn't hear wrong?" Head eunuch Li Guanwen hurriedly smiled and said, "Your Majesty, how could this servant not hear such a small matter clearly?" This piece of news really surprised this servant. The people outside have already spread the news. Everyone is saying that Prince Zhongshuan and Prince Consort Ji were angry because of a beauty. In their anger, they didn't even care about their face. This banter put Li Qitian in a good mood. He couldn't help but chuckle and shake his head. He's still young after all. He's still in the mood to fight over a girl. Li Qitian said with nostalgia in his eyes, "I don't even remember if I've ever felt this way before." Li Guanwen raised his eyebrows. He wondered what your Majesty was thinking. Why would she talk about love with him, a chamberlain? He wouldn't understand. However, there was still a lot of flattery in his mouth. "Your Majesty, you are at the best age for a man. There are so many women who admire you. You are just busy with court affairs and have no time to talk about these things." Li Qitian smiled and shook his head. "Those vulgar women, each and every one of them is only trying to flatter me because I am the emperor. In order to obtain benefits from the gaps between my fingers, I know that in my heart. Io, your Majesty, you are the ruler of the world. You are rich and in the prime of your life. How can you ask women not to fear your dragon nature?" These words were said with a bit of rebuke and a bit of jest. More of it was said with the lowly status of a chamberlain. He praised Li Qitian's majesty as the emperor and his charm as a man. Li Qitian didn't say anything, but he was very happy in his heart. His mood was better than ever. "You servant, you know a lot. How could this servant know these things? I just saw it with my own eyes and spoke the truth." Li Guanwen appeared to be in fear and trepidation. Li Qitian laughed again when he heard this. He snorted and said, "You have a glib tongue. You only know how to say nice things to coax me. This servant doesn't dare. This servant is loyal and devoted to your Majesty. I only know how to speak the truth." Li Qitian finally couldn't help but laugh. "I know you're loyal. Forget it. You go to Prince Zhongshuan's residence and Prince Consort's residence for me. Call the imperial physician and take a good look at their injuries. Don't make their injuries too serious." Li Qitian stood up and paced a few steps with his hands behind his back. He shook his head and said, "They are both pillars of the country. The war hasn't even started yet, but they are already killing each other. It's really unseemly for outsiders to see. You also say a few words to them for me." "Yes, this servant will definitely bring your Majesty's care and admonishment." Li Qitian nodded with satisfaction. He was very satisfied that Li Guanwen had grasped the main point of his words. He waved his hand and said, "Go. Carefully observe their situation and report back to me." "As you wish." Li Guanwen's expression turned cold. He secretly analyzed what kind of news Li Qitian wanted to hear the most. He respectfully retreated. Li Guanwen first took Imperial Physician Ma to the Prince Consort's residence. Ji Ziyu's handsome face was cold like an ice sculpture. Facing Li Guanwen, a great eunuch that many officials wanted to curry favor with, he only nodded slightly. Li Guanwen didn't dare to neglect. He respectfully bowed and quickly glanced at Ji Ziyu's red and swollen forehead. He lowered his head and didn't dare to look. Imperial Physician Ma took Ji Ziyu's pulse and examined him. He said, "Prince Consort, these are all superficial wounds. It's not serious. Apply some medicine to promote blood circulation and remove blood stasis. It'll be fine after a massage." Ji Ziyu faintly responded. When Imperial Physician Ma went to instruct the servants on how to apply the medicine, Li Guanwen said, "Prince Consort Ji, your Majesty instructed this servant to ask you what exactly happened." Ziyu coldly snorted. Pang Zhishi is too much of a bully. She deserves a beating. He angrily flicked his sleeves and left. Li Guanwen stood in the same place. He knew that Ziyu's personality was like this, so he didn't bicker with him. After Imperial Physician Ma instructed the servants in the Prince Consort's residence, he went to Prince Zhongshuan's residence. The reception in the Prince Consort's residence was much more enthusiastic than that of the Prince Consort's residence. The doorman passed a message inside. Not long after, the Prince Consort's chief steward, Su Weiji, came out to greet Li Guanwen politely. "Chief Steward Li, please take a seat inside. You flatter me. I came here by imperial edict and am in a hurry to report back. May I know where Prince Zhongshuan is?" A trace of embarrassment flashed across Su Weiji's face. He tried to cover it up and said, Prince Zhongshuan will be coming out soon." When Li Guanwen saw this, he became even more curious. Su Weiji led Li Guanwen to the front hall first. He accompanied him on the side and urged the servant to pass the message inside. He lowered his voice and instructed, "Just say that Chief Steward Li from the palace is here. If Madame Pang wants to be punished to kneel, wait a moment." The servant hurriedly left. Li Guanwen keenly caught the words Madame Pang and kneel as punishment. He couldn't help but feel surprised. He didn't expect that Prince Zhongshuan, who was like a tyrant, would be punished and kneel at home. Li Guanwen thought for a moment and suddenly realized something. He didn't expect Madame Pang to be so dignified when she returned to Prince Zhongshuan's residence. Prince Zhongshuan, who had outstanding military achievements, was also so filial. He actually listened to whatever his mother said. Li Guanwen repeatedly clicked his tongue. He felt that Your Majesty would definitely want to know about the interactions between Prince Zhongshuan and his mother. Therefore, Li Guanwen immediately put on the airs of the chief of eunuchs and said, "Your Majesty also ordered me to send my regards to Madame Pang. Why don't we go and see?" As he said this, he stepped into the inner residence. Su Weiji's face turned pale when he heard this. He anxiously scratched his ears and cheeks and said, This is not appropriate. Our Wang Yi will be coming out soon." Li Guanwen dragged his voice and looked at Su Weiji with great dignity. "I came here by imperial edict. Are you going to defy imperial edict?" "I don't dare. This lowly one doesn't dare." Su Weiji's body trembled. He hastily bowed and apologized. He said with great fear, "I hope Chief Steward doesn't take offense. Since Chief Steward came here by imperial edict, I think the master inside won't have any complaints. Chief Steward, please come with me." Chapter 372. It was the first time that Li Guanwen had a chance to visit the inner residence of Prince Zhongshuan's mansion carefully. Although he kept a straight face along the way, his eyes looked around flexibly. Su Weiji led the way in the front and warmly turned back to greet him from time to time. However, Li Guanwen could see Su Weiji's nervousness and embarrassment from his expression. Did he think that he didn't know? No wonder the housekeeper of the prince's mansion was embarrassed. Wang Yi was not a child. He was already an adult, but he was still punished by his official mother to kneel because of a fight outside. If this happened to him, he would also be embarrassed. They entered the inner residence and went straight to the upper house. Li Guanwen asked inconspicuously, "Madame Pang lived in the upper house after returning to the mansion?" "Yes." After Madame Pang returned to the mansion, Madame Dowager said that Madame Pang should be respected as the madam of the Pang family. So, she moved the pine crane hall out of the upper house and moved it to the backyard. "Oh." Li Guanwen couldn't help but say in surprise, "Madame Dowager is so righteous. It's really admirable." Prince Zhongshuan was not even the son of a concubine of Madame Pang. Moreover, the Pang family had some disputes in the past. When Your Majesty sent Madame Pang to Prince Zhongshuan's mansion, Prince Zhongshuan would only treat her with courtesy. No one would say anything bad about it. Who would expect that Prince Zhongshuan would treat his official mother so well? Whether the reason for this kindness was out of respect for his official mother or loyalty to Your Majesty, Li Guanwen really admired Pang Xiao for being able to do this. "What about Old Master and Madame Dowager?" Li Guanwen asked again. Su Weiji smiled and said, "Now, they also live in the pine crane hall in the backyard. Madame Dowager lives with Old Master and Madame Dowager." Li Guanwen nodded and noted it down. While they were talking, they arrived at the upper courtyard. Li Guanwen happened to see a little girl running in. It seemed that the servant had just gone to the second gate and told the old maid guarding the gate. The old maid then asked the little girl to pass the message, so she was a little late. Li Guanwen quickened his pace and saw the little girl running into the courtyard. In the middle of the courtyard, there was indeed a familiar tall figure kneeling there. Prince Zhongshuan was actually forced to kneel by his deemed mother. Even though Li Guanwen had already heard some of it, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded at this moment. It was because Pang Zhao's domineering and majestic image was too deeply rooted in people's hearts that Li Guanwen couldn't connect this embarrassed person who was punished by his official mother to kneel with the god of war Wang Yi in his memory, who could make enemies tremble with fear with just a stare. Pang Zhao might have heard the little girl's message. He suddenly turned around and saw Li Guanwen enter the courtyard under the lead of Su Weiji. Li Guanwen clearly saw the unwillingness and embarrassment on Pang Zhao's face. Pang Zhao didn't care about continuing to kneel as punishment. He stood up and looked at Su Weiji with a sullen face. "Steward Su, how are you doing your job? Why didn't you inform me earlier that Chief Stewardly was coming? How can this prince neglect Chief Stewardly like this? How can this be?" Li Guanwen had served your majesty for many years and understood the thoughts of this kind of person. Even though Prince Zhongshuan's military power had been stripped, his prestige in the military was still the same. This was a person that even your majesty had to be wary of. How could he, a chief of the eunuchs, offend him? Therefore, Li Guanwen lowered his head and bowed, respectfully waiting on the side. He didn't have the arrogance that he had when he arrived. Su Weiji lowered his head in fear and trepidation. He bowed and said, "In reply to Wang Yi, Chief Stewardly came under the imperial order. This lowly one also had no choice. Please forgive me, Wang Yi." Pang Zhao looked at Su Weiji with a sullen face. Before he had time to speak, the curtains in front of the main room's door were lifted up by someone. A woman in her 50s with a plump figure and gray hair came out of the door with the help of a maidservant. Madame Pang's face was full of wrinkles, especially the deep wrinkles between her eyebrows, which made her face look full of anger. Even if she didn't show any expression, she seemed to be in a rage. Her appearance, when she was young, was already indistinguishable. But now it seemed that she was a bad-tempered person with thin lips and harsh lips. "Wang Yi, you must not vent your anger on others." Madame Pang frowned and said, "Chief Steward Su has done his best for the mansion. Chief Steward Li came under the imperial order. How could Chief Steward Su stop him?" These words of reprimand. The reason was right, but was it really good to say it out loud? Li Guanwen was an outsider, but the corner of his mouth twitched when he heard it. Pang Zhao bowed respectfully. His attitude wasn't intimate, but he said respectfully, "Thank you, madam, for your guidance." Madam Pang responded in a drawn-out voice. Then, she slowly walked down the stairs. When she arrived in front of Li Guanwen, her attitude had changed completely. A smile hung on her angry face. Her voice wasn't as serious as when she talked to Pang Zhao. Instead, she said with a smile, "I'm really rude. This old woman has just arrived in the mansion. I haven't had the time to reorganize the mansion. The whole mansion is in a mess. I'm sorry for making you laugh." "Don't say that. Old madam, you should take care of your health. Your majesty is also concerned about your health." Madam Pang's eyes narrowed with a smile. "This old woman is vulgar. Your majesty still has to worry about me. I'm really scared. Your majesty, please rest assured. This old woman will certainly admonish Wang Yi. There won't be such an absurd thing in the future." "Oh, please don't say that." Li Guanwen had been wailing in his heart for a long time. How capable was this Madame Pang? Her husband had died many years ago, but she still talked to Pang Zhao like this. She didn't take him in as a concubine's son, nor did she raise him. Moreover, she didn't speak to Wang Yi in such a way. "Wang Yi is your majesty's backbone. This time, I came here under the order to check Wang Yi's injury. If Madame Pang doesn't mind, I'll call the imperial physician to come and check Wang Yi. Then, I'll have to thank your majesty for your understanding. Li Guanwen went to call Imperial Physician Ma. The wound on Pang Zhao's arm was bandaged. However, there were still bloodstains on the snow-white gauze. It looked shocking. In addition, there was a bruise on the corner of his mouth. Even though Li Guanwen didn't see the scene of the two fighting with his own eyes, he could imagine that both of them must have used a heavy hand at that time. After Imperial Physician Ma rebandaged Pang Zhao's wound and applied medicine, Li Guanwen saluted and asked respectfully, "Wang Yi, your majesty wants this servant to ask you what happened at that time." Pang Zhao's sword-like eyebrows were raised. He angrily snorted and said, "That bastard is asking for a beating. Wait for this prince to seize the opportunity. I will definitely avenge this sword." In the end, he was still a person who fought on the battlefield. Under his anger, Li Guanwen couldn't help but shrink his neck. Madame Pang wasn't afraid of Pang Zhao at all. She said in a deep voice, "Wang Yi, you are a subject, but Prince Consort Ji is a relative of the imperial family. How can you speak like this? Don't you remember the family rules of the Pang family?" Pang Zhao frowned when he heard this. It could be seen that he was on the verge of exploding in anger, but he still didn't refute. Madame Pang said, "In the end, you didn't have the fate to be raised in the mansion. You learned some rascals in the marketplace. How did your mother teach you? If you grew up in the mansion, you wouldn't be so unruly. If your father was still alive and saw that you didn't make any progress, he would break your legs." When Li Guanwen heard this, he almost knelt down to Madame Pang. In the whole world, among the people who were unrelated to Pang Zhao, perhaps only Madame Pang dared to talk to him like this. Pang Zhao, who had endured for a whole day, finally couldn't control his anger. He said in a deep voice, "Madame Pang, this king respects you because of his father, whom he has never met. Don't push your luck." Madame Pang was stunned. Since she came to Prince Zhongshuan's mansion, she had never seen Pang Zhao angry with her. It was because of Pang Zhao's polite treatment and concession that Madame Pang had the confidence to discipline him. She didn't expect that a person who usually looked docile and harmless would be so terrifying when he released a murderous aura that only appeared on the battlefield. Pang Zhao said, "If it weren't for Madame Pang's jealousy, how could I not have the fate to be raised in the mansion? You know what happened in the past better than anyone else. This king respects you, but please don't go too far. At that time, my mother was driven away by you, and you sent people to assassinate her. She was lucky to escape. Since then, she has nothing to do with the general's mansion. I've never been recognized by you. My title of nobility was earned through my own hard work. I didn't borrow any of your Pang family's glory. I'm treating you courteously now because of my self-restraint. If you want to continue manipulating my mother, sizing her up, and thinking that she's still the servant girl you persecuted in the past, then you're wrong. I, Pang Zhishi, don't have any other skills. As you said, I am a scoundrel. When the time comes, I will kill you. Let's see who can do anything to me." You. Madame Pang's face was pale. It was unknown whether she was angry or scared. "You're simply incorrigible. You don't care about human relations." Pang Zhao smiled coldly. He turned around and asked Li Guanwen, "Did the chief steward see what happened today?" Li Guanwen bowed his head and said, "Yes, I've been watching carefully." "Wang Yi, do you have any orders?" Pang Zhao said, "It is good that you saw Madame Pang's unreasonable behavior clearly. Later, I will go to the palace to beg your majesty. I will also ask Chief Steward Li to testify for this king." "Testify?" Li Guanwen did not understand and said, "Wang Yi, what do you want to do?" Pang Zhao said, "This king is very grateful that your majesty helped our Pang family find Madame Pang. However, this king's mansion is small and cannot accommodate two families. Madame Pang made things difficult for my grandfather and grandmother. My mother was also ordered around by her. When this king saw this, he did not know why he opposed Beiji's tyranny in the first place. Beiji did not oppose at that time. Aren't they living like this? A woman who caused trouble was enough to cause chaos in the entire family. Pang Zhao did not want to keep Madame Pang, but it was your majesty's arrangement at the beginning, so he could only obey. Now that so much time had passed, he might as well take advantage of his bad mood today to remove this nail from the mansion. Li Guanwen's heart thumped when he heard this. Even Madame Peng's expression changed greatly. She said anxiously, "What right do you have to send me away? If it were not for your father, would you even exist in this world? I am your father's legal wife. For your father's sake, you have to be filial." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.